Chapter 2855. Global Transformation Inside the Summoning Altar. As the divine runes enveloping Xueqi disappeared, Auerbach snapped his eyes open and stared at him in surprise. You succeeded? Actually, Auerbach could tell that Xueqi had completed the trial the moment he laid eyes on the human. This was because Xueqi looked completely different in his eyes right now. Although there was no change to Xueqi's level, the mana he radiated was completely different from before he challenged the trial. Not only did Xueqi's mana blend much better with the ambient mana, but the quality of his mana had also undergone a qualitative transformation. The fact that Xueqi had such exquisite control over his own mana proved that he had conquered the trial. However, Auerbach still found this situation unbelievable. Xueqi would already be plenty amazing if he managed to complete the trial on his third attempt. Yet, now, Xueqi had actually completed the trial on his first attempt. I got lucky. Xueqi nodded. If his concentration hadn't broken through to the Tier 5 standard at the very last minute, which allowed him to receive the world blessing to reconstruct his sea of consciousness, completing the trial would have been a pipe dream. No. It is impossible for someone to pass the trial by relying on luck. It is all because of your own strength, Auerbach said, shaking his head. Since you've passed the trial according to our contract, I, Auerbach, acknowledge you as my contractor from now on. As soon as Auerbach finished speaking, Xueqi felt a scorching sensation on his left arm. Before Xueqi realized it, the symbol of a silver dragon had been branded on his left arm. Simultaneously, the system's emotionless voice rang out in his mind. System. Congratulations! You have completed the second phase of the epic quest Void Cage, and received the Silver Divine Dragon Auerbach's acknowledgement. You have become a true dragon's contractor. You now have the ability to call upon the Silver Divine Dragon to fight for you at any time. Rewarding 30 legacy skill points and 1 level. Xueqi's level immediately rose from level 150 to level 151. His legacy skill points also increased by 30. If you encounter any troubles in the future, call upon me, Auerbach said. With the contractor's mark, I can teleport to your location at any time. However, you should still be cautious. The contractor's mark has limited power. I cannot sense its location in certain areas. Moreover, the current god's domain is no longer the same. Although you have made significant growth, if you behave too aggressively outside, you might still fall into a desperate situation. You might even have your soul annihilated. Different? Has the world passage opened already? Auerbach's words startled Xueqi. Auerbach could defeat even ordinary Tier 5 individuals. Since he was issuing such a dire warning, the current god's domain must have undergone drastic changes. That's right. The world passage is completely open now. Existences of another world have invaded this world. In fact, some of God's domain's rules have already changed. You will understand what I mean if you go out and take a look, Auerbach said, nodding. He then pointed at the door that was sealed by a magic array and continued, If you encounter trouble, it is best if you summon me immediately. Thank you for your warning, Your Excellency. I will be careful. Xueqi nodded and mentally noted to himself to be more careful. Afterward, he departed from the summoning altar. As for Auerbach, the Silver Divine Dragon resumed its slumber in the summoning altar. The moment Xueqi exited the summoning tower, he was stunned. What dense mana! The density of the Starlight Fortress's ambient mana had more than doubled compared to before he went to the Dragon Temple. Apart from Zero Wing City, probably no other guild city in God's domain possessed such dense mana. Even Stone Forest City couldn't compare. Moreover, Xueqi could feel his affinity with mana increasing while bathed in this dense mana. He could also perceive the operating principles of mana with much greater clarity. This place was practically a weakened version of the ancient God's domain. However, compared to the mana environment, the changes to the Starlight Fortress's player population were even more shocking. Before Xueqi left to challenge the Divine Dragon's trial, the Starlight Fortress's player traffic had already reached a very frightening level. However, the present fortress's player population had more than tripled since then. Xueqi even spotted quite a few Tier 4 experts just on the street he was walking on. Moreover, he sensed the presence of at least 70 Tier 4 experts inside the Starlight Fortress. This number was simply mind-blowing. However, this still wasn't the most shocking part about the fortress. Compared to the Starlight Fortress's interior, the fortress's surroundings were much more crowded. From what Xueqi could tell, Well over 1 million players were lining up to enter the fortress. These players weren't ordinary players. Even the weakest one among them was a Tier 3 player, and every one of them was at least at level 135. There were also Tier 4 experts standing in the queue. If not for these players standing in line obediently, Xueqi would have suspected that these people were aiming to capture the Starlight Fortress. However, before Xueqi could recover from his surprise, he saw a group of people charging through the main street toward the fortress's entrance. This group's leader was none other than Magic Eye Goddess Phythalia, the commander of Divine Tribe's Divine Hymn Legion. At this time, Phythalia had reached not only Tier 4 but also level 145. Given the intensity of the mana she radiated, she had broken through her mana body's 100% threshold as well. From what Xueqi could tell, Phythalia should also have at least 2 fragmented legendary items on her. In her current state, she could probably hold her ground against a superior mythic monster of the same level. Moreover, aside from Phythalia, there were 3 other Tier 4s in the team she led. These 3 players were at the Void Realm standard and boasted 8 or more pieces of epic equipment. The only unfortunate part was that none of them had transcended the limits of their mana bodies. Even so, the strength of Phythalia's team was more than enough to raid superior mythic monsters of the same level. However, Phythalia and the others looked anxious as they rushed toward the entrance. Did something happen? Curious, Xueqi stealthily followed Phythalia's team. Divine Tribe could be considered Zero Wing's strategic ally on the Western continent. Moreover, it was tasked with maintaining the Starlight Fortress's security on Zero Wing's behalf. Unless something major occurred, someone of Phythalia's status wouldn't take action. If need be, Xueqi naturally had to lend her a helping hand. Shortly afterward, Phythalia's team arrived at the Starlight Fortress's entrance. At this time, the players outside the entrance were staring curiously at a group of people standing before the fortress's checkpoint. To be precise, it was a mixed group of NPCs and players. Among these players were 5 Tier 4s. As for the NPCs, there were actually over a dozen Tier 4s among them. Why are people of the Blood Alliance here? Don't the superpowers in the Alliance mainly operate out at sea? It is indeed strange. From what I remember, they've never been active on land. Instead, they've been dominating the seas since the start of the game. Even the 5 great superguilds don't dare offend them out at sea. I heard that many naval forces have clashed with the Outer Worlds forces at sea. Although neither side managed to secure an advantage, the Blood Alliance suffered heavy losses in these clashes. Rumor has it that the Alliance has over 5 million Tier 3 casualties thus far. 3 of the Alliance's islands were razed to the ground. The players in the queue couldn't help starting heated discussions among themselves as they looked at the Tier 4 players and NPCs. While the Blood Alliance's sphere of operations was mostly limited to the sea, the Starlight Fortress was nowhere near the sea. Just teleporting from a coastal city to the Starlight Fortress cost nearly 6 gold coins. Are they greedy for the Starlight Fortress's benefits? That's probably the case. After all, the current Starlight Fortress is simply amazing. Its mana density and the benefits the mana provides are much greater than what you can find elsewhere on the continent. Not to mention, it is also near a God Mode regional dungeon. That can't be right. Don't they know that a Tier 4 Divine Dragon is guarding this place? That's not something Tier 4 existences can go up against. While everyone wondered why members of the Blood Alliance had come to the Starlight Fortress, Phythalia's team arrived before the Blood Alliance group. Guild Leader Brute, to what do we owe this sudden visit? Phythalia asked a thin man wearing a grey robe and carrying a dark wooden staff. The Blood Alliance had arrived with more than a dozen Tier 4 NPCs and 3 of the Blood Alliance's top 10 Tier 4 experts. It definitely wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the Blood Alliance came with bad intentions. Commander Phythalia, you don't need to be so nervous. We are not here to ask for trouble. Moreover, we aren't here to meet you, Brute said, smiling faintly. In fact, this matter doesn't have anything to do with Divine Tribe. We are simply here to find Zero Wing and negotiate a partnership. Negotiate a partnership with Zero Wing? Phythalia laughed at Brute's statement. I naturally don't have a say in such a matter. However, seeing as you've brought so many Tier 4 NPCs with you, no matter how I look at it, it doesn't seem like you've come for a friendly negotiation. Read latest chapters at Xueqi World. I didn't call them here, Brute countered, shaking his head. These people are the representatives of various NPC naval forces. Representatives of NPC naval forces? Phythalia was surprised by Brute's answer. If only one NPC force had sent these Tier 4 NPCs, she wouldn't have found the situation strange. However, it was a different story if these NPCs represented multiple NPC forces. This was something she had to take seriously. In God's domain, the reason many kingdoms and empires had chosen not to spread their influence to the sea wasn't just the presence of powerful sea monsters. Another reason was the extraordinary strength of many NPC naval forces, with some even having Tier 5 NPCs leading them. Nodding, Brute said in an indisputable tone, "That's right. It's fine if you do not let us enter, Commander Phythalia. However, I don't mind letting you know that the Blood Alliance plans to requisition a portion of the Starlight Fortress's temporary residences to resist the Outer World invaders." Chapter 2856. Half-Step Tier 5 Requisition. Phythalia was momentarily stunned by Brute's words. "Have you lost your mind, Brute?" Phythalia wasn't the only person to have such thoughts. The spectating crowd thought so as well. The Blood Alliance, with its many superpowers and NPC forces, was indeed powerful. However, the Alliance's strength was only in the sea. On the Western continent, the Blood Alliance held no advantages. Since the Starlight Fortress was far from the sea, the Blood Alliance had no way to dispatch a large army to the Starlight Fortress. Moreover, the Starlight Fortress's defenses were something that even the 5 great super guilds were helpless against. After all, the fortress had a Tier 4 divine dragon guarding it. Even Tier 5 NPCs wouldn't dare go against such an existence. This was why Zero Wing could retain control over the Starlight Fortress despite having barely any of its own forces stationed on the Western continent. Otherwise, the surrounding NPC forces with Tier 5 NPCs leading them would have long since targeted the fortress. The only measure one could employ to suppress the Starlight Fortress was to place a thorough lockdown on the Star Valley. However, the Blood Alliance clearly didn't have the capability to pull off such a feat. "Lost my mind?" Laughing, Brute retorted, "I don't think so at all. The Starlight Fortress indeed possesses powerful defensive capabilities, and there are very few forces in God's domain capable of threatening it. However, if over 100 Tier 4 NPCs lock down the Star Valley, I wonder how long the Starlight Fortress will last?" Over 100 Tier 4 NPCs? When Brute finished speaking, the spectating crowd gasped. Currently, not only were NPCs much higher level than players on average, but NPCs were also stronger than players of the same level and tier on average. This was because NPCs' weapons, equipment, skills, and spells were superior to those of the average player. Meanwhile, a force of more than 100 Tier 4 NPCs was something not even a kingdom possessed. In other words, the Blood Alliance could actually dispatch an entire kingdom's top combatants to seal a map. Moreover, I heard that the situation over on the Eastern continent is quite adverse, and many superpowers have already gotten annihilated. Even Zero Wing can barely keep itself afloat and can't roam about freely. In such a situation, obtaining resources will naturally be impossible, Brute said. Without the Starlight Fortress's resources, I believe Zero Wing will have even more difficulty surviving, right? Hence, we are inviting Zero Wing to become a member of the Blood Alliance right now. Not only will we help the Starlight Fortress develop, but we will also help Zero Wing defend against the Outer World invaders. Wouldn't this situation be the best of both worlds? Upon hearing Brute's proposal, nobody present could offer any rebuttals, not even Phythalia. The chaos on the Eastern continent was no longer a secret. The entire God's domain had been greatly shaken on the day the World Passage had opened, the sudden event catching countless powers off guard. After all, a group of unknown player forces had suddenly appeared and taken over many guild cities of first-rate guilds. In fact, these unknown player forces had even laid their hands on the guild cities of superpowers. Originally, these superpowers had planned to retaliate against these unknown invaders. However, when they marched their armies to reclaim their cities, they found a large number of experts already gathered in their captured cities. Moreover, there were even many Tier 45 among these players. Needless to say, none of the superpowers managed to recapture their cities. Initially, the various powers of God's domain thought that this was merely a hidden superpower making its public debut. After all, this wasn't the first time such a situation had taken place. Many player forces would continuously accumulate their strength in secret, and make a powerful debut all of a sudden. Hence, the various powers of God's domain had not placed too much attention on this matter. However, the next day, over a dozen superpowers had suddenly made their presence known to the world, and the number of Tier 4 players these superpowers commanded far exceeded that of the local superpowers. On that very day, these new superpowers annihilated a local superpower and split up its territory among themselves. This war had thoroughly stupefied the various powers of God's domain. It was one thing to see a new superpower emerge, but it was another thing altogether to see so many superpowers appear out of the blue. Moreover, all of these superpowers boasted an incredible number of Tier 4 players. No matter how one looked at this situation, it was simply unbelievable. After a series of frantic investigations, the various powers of God's domain eventually discovered that these new superpowers didn't originate from their version of God's domain but from another God's domain. Moreover, the players belonging to these superpowers didn't live on Earth but on an interstellar continent. The human population of this interstellar continent rivaled that of Earth. Most importantly, the average combat standard of these interstellar continent residents was much higher than that of Earthlings. This was because the world of God's domain was everything for these people. In addition, these outer-world superpowers were much stronger than the native superpowers. In fact, the two couldn't even be compared on the same level. In less than 5 days, these outer-world superpowers had not only destroyed several native superpowers but even taken over 7 kingdoms. These kingdoms were now paradises for outer-world NPCs, who rapidly harvested the various resources available in these kingdoms to keep growing stronger. Meanwhile, in response to these invaders, the various native kingdoms and empires had gathered players to fight off these outer-world players and NPCs. The subsequent war was most likely one of the biggest in God's domain's history, as several dozen kingdoms and empires had joined hands to counter the invasion. And after fighting dozens of battles, both large and small, the Eastern Continent's native forces eventually managed to isolate the outer world's NPC forces to one corner of the continent. However, in exchange for this outcome, the Eastern Continent's native forces had lost nearly 1/3 of their land. Moreover, this isolation affected only the outer world's NPC forces. The outer world's individual NPCs and player forces could still roam freely. In a situation where native players were inferior in terms of both levels and combat standards, the Eastern Continent's players were at an absolute disadvantage. Only by cooperating with native NPCs could they resist the outer world players. It was obvious that the Eastern Continent's native forces would crumble in the near future as more and more outer world players and NPCs invaded the Eastern Continent. In fact, it wouldn't be long before the Western Continent would get dragged into the war since the various sea zones were already engulfed in the flames of war. If the Starlight Fortress were to get isolated now, Zero Wing would definitely suffer immeasurable consequences. After all, due to the outer world forces occupying many of the Eastern Continent's resource spots, prices of various resources had more than doubled. If Zero Wing were to lose the resources from the Starlight Fortress, the guild would most likely struggle to defend its guild cities. In this situation, Phythalia herself was powerless to do anything. Even if Divine Tribe were willing to help Zero Wing with all of its strength, there was no way Divine Tribe could win against a force of over 100 Tier 4 NPCs. Eventually, Phythalia sighed and said, "I understand. I'll convey your words to Zero Wing." "Good then." Nodding, Brute said indifferently, "However, our patience is limited. Tell Zero Wing that they only have 1 day to reply. If they don't give us an answer by then, we will begin sealing the map immediately." 1 day. Phythalia frowned. This was too short. It was barely enough time for her to convey the message and for Zero Wing to hold a short discussion among its executives. Zero Wing wouldn't have any time to make the necessary preparations at all. That's right. Only 1 day. Zero Wing had best not waste any time. That wouldn't be beneficial to the Blood Alliance or Zero Wing. Brute said in a determined tone. "I can even tell Zero Wing now that if they refuse our offer, while it might give the Blood Alliance some trouble, I can guarantee that they will suffer 100 times more than us." After Brute finished speaking, the Tier 4 NPCs standing behind him promptly unleashed their auras. The combined aura of over a dozen Tier 4 NPCs pressured even Phythalia. If not for the buff from standing inside the Starlight Fortress, she might have even succumbed to this mighty aura and stumbled back. As for the other Divine Tribe members, their complexions had paled. It was evident that they felt very uncomfortable beneath this frightening aura. However, just as Phythalia was about to speak up, a calm and deep voice suddenly entered everyone's ears. "A partnership won't be necessary. Zero Wing doesn't need allies like you bunch." At this voice of rejection, everyone present turned reflexively toward its origin, curious to see who would be so bold as to decide for Zero Wing. Who said that? Come out. Brute, in particular, reacted with anger and displeasure. He never thought that someone would dare openly challenge the Blood Alliance. Black Flame. Zero Wing's guild leader has arrived already? When everyone present saw the cloaked man approaching Phythalia and Brute, they quickly recognized him, based on the two long swords hanging by his waist, as well as his dark and determined eyes. Guild leader Black Flame? Phythalia was stunned when she saw Xuefeng. This was because Xuefeng's present self was completely different from when she last met him. Not only did his body radiate frighteningly dense mana right now, but she could also sense a difference in life rating between them. Half-step Tier 5? When the elderly level 167, Tier 4 NPC at the head of the Blood Alliance's group saw Xuefeng, he gasped in shock. Half-step Tier 5? How is this possible? When the surrounding players overheard the elderly NPC's words, they similarly gaped at Xuefeng with astonished gazes. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU nowadays, Tier 4 players were no longer as rare as before. Hence, most Tier 3 players in God's domain no longer found Tier 4 players foreign. At the same time, they also knew just how difficult it was to get promoted from Tier 4 to Tier 5, as well as how wide the gulf between Tier 4 and Tier 5 existences was. Meanwhile, a half-step Tier 5 existence referred to Tier 4 individuals who had achieved an incredibly high standard in their control over mana and their mana body. After reaching this stage, so long as a Tier 4 individual successfully constructed a sufficiently strong mana body for themselves, they would become a Tier 5 existence. An existence even NPC empires feared greatly. Yet, in an era where mainstream players had just reached Tier 3 and only an extremely small number of experts had reached Tier 4, they were now being told that Xuefeng had already reached the half-step Tier 5 standard. No matter how they thought about it, this didn't seem plausible. However, as a Tier 4 NPC had said these words, they were unlikely to be false. I said that. What kind of guidance do you have for me? I wonder, Guild Leader Brute. Xuefeng asked calmly as he stared at Brute. Chapter 2857. Black Flame? You're Black Flame. Brute was stunned when he saw Xuefeng. Half-step Tier 5. In the current era, where the various superpowers barely had any Tier 4 players under their command, a half-step Tier 5 existence was practically invincible. In fact, one would have difficulty finding a half-step Tier 5 existence even among the Outer Worlds players and NPCs. That's right. I am, Xuefeng said, nodding. So, it's Guild Leader Black Flame. Everything before was only a misunderstanding. We don't have any intentions of isolating the Starlight Fortress, Brute said, smiling fawningly. Since you aren't interested in partnering with us, the Blood Alliance won't force the issue, Guild Leader Black Flame. If there is nothing else, we will take our leave now. As soon as Brute finished speaking, he turned around, planning to leave the Starlight Fortress together with the Blood Alliance's members. He had no intention of staying even a second longer. A misunderstanding? Xuefeng laughed at Brute's words. Guild Leader Brute, you brought over a dozen Tier 4 NPCs and came all the way here to declare that you plan to isolate the Starlight Fortress. Yet you're telling me this is a misunderstanding? Since you've already come here, then stay here. After saying so, Xuefeng manifested his mana domain, enveloping a 4,000-yard radius in liquid mana. As soon as Xuefeng unleashed his mana domain, Brute and the others stiffened. Their bodies felt indescribably heavy as if they had sunk into a swamp. The level 160+, Tier 4 NPCs were just barely able to counter this suppression by releasing their own mana domains. However, none of them could manipulate the mana around them. Phythalia was astonished when Xuefeng took action. She never thought that he would do so without a second word. After all, the Blood Alliance's side had more than a dozen Tier 4 NPCs. While these NPCs might not be a match for Xuefeng in a one-on-one fight, if they worked together, they could potentially take on even a Tier 5 existence. Not good. This is world creation. The elderly Tier 4 NPC leading the other NPCs exclaimed, an indescribably grim expression appearing on his face as he stared at Xuefeng. The fact that Xuefeng was at the half-step Tier 5 standard was already plenty frightening. That, combined with his control over mana being at the world creation standard, meant he could fight Tier 5 existences already. In front of such an expert, even a group of Tier 4 individuals would be insignificant. What made Tier 4 individuals much more powerful than Tier 3 individuals was their ability to strengthen their abilities using the ambient mana. However, individuals who had reached the world creation standard could create a miniature world with their mana domain. All the mana within the domain would operate by rules favorable to the user and disadvantageous to hostile forces. Unless one had similarly reached the world creation standard, manipulating the ambient mana while standing in a world creation level mana domain would be impossible. One could only rely on the mana in one's body to do battle, essentially losing all the advantages of Tier 4. World creation was something Xueqi achieved after his concentration had reached the Tier 5 standard. To be precise, he had first reached the Grandmaster Magician standard after his concentration had reached the Tier 5 standard. Then, his mana domain had automatically transformed into a miniature world. He didn't even have to transform it consciously. "Run!" Brute shouted in a panic. "Run! With your abilities?" Xueqi unsheathed the Abyssal Blade and activated Darkness Bind. After getting upgraded to Tier 4, Darkness Bind's range had improved tremendously. The next moment, pitch-black chains emerged from the void within a 500-yard radius and instantly constrained the Blood Alliance members' movements. The chains not only prevented the use of skills and spells, but also drastically reduced their target's mobility. Xueqi appeared before the Blood Alliance members and brandished the Light of Two Worlds. Tier 4 Legacy Skill. Formless Blade. Swords Transmigration. 13 sword lights shot at the chests of Brute and the others, so fast that barely any of them managed to react to the attacks in time. Of the Blood Alliance players, only Brute, who had broken through the 100% threshold of his mana body, managed to activate a Tier 4 defensive spell in time. Even so, the Tier 4 barrier he summoned shattered after receiving Xueqi's attack. As for the other Tier 4 players, none of them survived the attack. Even a Tier 4 shield warrior died on the spot. The Tier 4 NPCs fared a little better than the players. Because of their significant advantage in levels and equipment, they all managed to activate a Tier 4 defensive skill or spell in time and block the attacks directed at them. Even so, having used up one of their life-saving measures, these NPCs wouldn't be able to reuse these skills and spells within a short time. However, Xueqi had no intention of giving the Blood Alliance's members any room to catch a breather. After completing his first attack, he promptly activated Blade Domain and executed Swords Transmigration once more. Under Xueqi's control, the 7 magic swords exhibited power at the Tier 5 standard. Brute and the Tier 4 NPCs were cornered and had no choice but to work together to cope with Xueqi's attacks. Despite not holding anything back, they were still forced to use their life-saving measures one after another. For a time, explosions and spatial tears roiled the entrance of the Starlight Fortress. After these noises continued for around 30 seconds, Brute and the Blood Alliance's Tier 4 NPCs all turned into ashes, becoming deader than dead. They died just like that? So this is Black Flame's strength? Amazing! Isn't he basically a Tier 5 now? The spectators gaped in shock when they saw the Blood Alliance's people annihilated, unable to get their minds around the situation for a long time. After all, Brute was a domain realm expert. If he worked together with more than a dozen Tier 4 NPCs, they could probably raid even Tier 5 legendary monsters. However, in front of Xueqi, these powerful individuals were like children. Throughout the fight, they could only defend themselves. They didn't have any leeway to retaliate or even heal themselves. Anyone who slipped up on their defense for even a moment got killed instantly. At this time, let alone the spectating crowd, even Phythalia was flabbergasted by this situation. She never thought that a person's combat power could achieve such frightening heights after reaching the half-step Tier 5 and world creation standards. With such combat power, Xueqi could probably go up against a true Tier 5 existence. Meanwhile, after killing the Blood Alliance's members, Xueqi didn't hesitate to pocket the items they dropped. Simultaneously, he marveled at the excellence of the items they dropped. Just the epic weapons and equipment he obtained numbered more than 10. Moreover, every one of them could be used up to level 150. After collecting his loot, Xueqi went to Phythalia's group and said gratefully, "Thank you for helping out with the Starlight Fortress's troubles throughout this period. If not for you all maintaining the fortress, it would have most likely become a mess long ago." From the Blood Alliance's movements, he could tell that many powers on the Western continent already had their sights set on the Starlight Fortress. The threat of the Divine Dragon was no longer sufficient to ensure the Starlight Fortress's development. After all, so long as these powers isolated the Starlight Fortress and prevented other players from visiting it, they could easily stifle the fortress's development. "You exaggerate, Guild Leader Black Flame." However, you dealt a heavy blow to the Blood Alliance. The Alliance is unlikely to take this lying down, Phythalia said. She then added, we have already conducted a thorough investigation into the Blood Alliance. It consists of more than 10 superpowers and quite a number of powerful NPC forces. Some of these NPC forces even have Tier 5 NPCs leading them. This is why even the Outer World invaders are just barely able to suppress the Blood Alliance and not defeat it outright. With Xueqi's strength, offending superpowers wouldn't be a problem. However, it was a different story for NPC forces. Now that NPCs were no longer restricted by the system, so long as there were sufficient benefits to be had, they would be more than willing to take action against players. If a Tier 5 NPC were to attack the Starlight Fortress, even if the fortress could remain standing, it would still be a nightmare for the fortress. Relax. Even if a Tier 5 does come, they can do nothing, Xueqi said, chuckling nonchalantly. If it were before he had challenged the trial, he would indeed hesitate to clash with the Blood Alliance. However, he now had the ability to contend against Tier 5 existences. Not to mention, the Starlight Fortress even had Auerbeck guarding it. The Silver Divine Dragon could suppress even ordinary Tier 5 existences of the same level. Do nothing. Phythalia's eyes widened in shock. She couldn't help growing curious about the basis of Xueqi's confidence. In the current era where gods had secluded themselves, Tier 5 existences were considered the strongest combatants in God's domain. This was the same for the outer world. Every Tier 5 individual was a strategic existence that could single-handedly ensure the safety of a region. Hence, she found it inconceivable that Xueqi already had the ability to go up against Tier 5 existences. Not to mention, these were Tier 5 NPCs they were talking about, not Tier 5 players. Commander Phythalia, may I trouble you to get me these materials? Instead of explaining his confidence, Xueqi took out a list and handed it to Phythalia. I am willing to purchase them using magic crystals at double the market value. After taking a look at the materials on the list, Phythalia found that although these materials were rare and valuable, gathering them shouldn't be a problem with Divine Tribe's abilities. This shouldn't be a problem, but why would you want to purchase these materials at such a high price? With Zero Wings abilities, you should be able to gather these materials yourself. There's no need to pay double for them, much less pay in magic crystals, Phythalia asked as she looked at Xueqi strangely. Aside from the magic elven stone, the other materials on the list were relatively easy to obtain for a superpower. So long as Xueqi returned to the eastern continent, he could gather these materials at any time through Zero Wing. There was no need to pay such an exorbitant price. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You not bothering to hide his motives, Xueqi explained calmly. I don't have a choice. I urgently need these materials to connect the two continents. I won't have enough if I rely on only the Starlight Fortress's material stockpile, so I have to ask your guild to acquire them for me. Now that he could summon the Divine Dragon to his aid at any time, he could do many things that he dared not do before. Connect the two continents? Phythalia momentarily doubted her ears when she heard Xueqi's words. How is this possible? The two main continents of God's domain were incredibly far apart from each other. This was why the various superpowers had desperately contended over intercontinental teleportation arrays. Even so, these teleportation arrays came with a lot of limitations. If Xueqi really had a way to allow people to travel between the two continents freely, then that would be simply amazing. However, Xueqi just smiled in response to Phythalia's doubt and did not explain himself further. His past self would indeed be incapable of accomplishing such a feat, however. Now that he was a Grandmaster Magician, combined with the Starlight Fortress's summoning tower, such a feat wasn't particularly difficult. Chapter 2858, Intercontinental Teleportation Magic Array Starlight Fortress, Summoning Tower. After spending over 80,000 magic crystals to purchase all of the materials he needed from Divine Tribe, Xueqi immediately began working on the Summoning Tower's teleportation array. The Summoning Tower's main purpose was to summon monsters. It was a construction unique to the Starlight Fortress. However, the Starlight Fortress itself could be considered a teleportation tower, as it possessed a teleportation array and a spatial node passed down since ancient times. These inheritances were what allowed the Summoning Tower to summon monsters from other worlds to fight for the Starlight Fortress. Under normal circumstances, it shouldn't be possible for the Summoning Tower to facilitate intercontinental teleportation. However, Xueqi was now a grandmaster in manipulating magic arrays. He even possessed a teleportation magic array design. Hence, he could make the impossible possible. Not to mention, he had also seen quite a few guild cities that possessed player-made intercontinental teleportation arrays in his previous life. To achieve intercontinental teleportation, one needed to fulfill 3 conditions. The first condition was to have a Grandmaster Magician. The second condition was to have a teleportation magic array design. The third and most important condition was to have a spatial node on one of the 2 continents. Only after fulfilling these 3 conditions could one construct an intercontinental teleportation magic array. Meanwhile, there weren't many spatial nodes on the 2 continents. In total, they numbered less than 20. Moreover, many of them were in dangerous forbidden lands. However, so long as one managed to secure a spatial node, they could freely travel between the 2 main continents, no longer subject to the various limitations of ancient intercontinental magic arrays. This was why Xueqi was adamant about acquiring the Starlight Fortress previously. The only flaw intercontinental teleportation arrays had was their colossal energy consumption. Instead of using magic crystals like ordinary teleportation arrays did, an intercontinental teleportation array required mana stones as fuel. Moreover, each teleportation cost 10 mana stones. If the job of synthesizing mana stones using magic crystals were left to a master alchemist, it would cost nearly 1,000 magic crystals per teleportation. With such a high cost, even superpowers wouldn't be able to afford to teleport people between continents in large numbers. However, even with such a limitation, the intercontinental teleportation array was still plenty amazing after all. The 2 main continents had different resources. Trading in these resources could net massive profits. Moreover, transportation by teleportation was much more convenient than by air or by sea. Most importantly, an intercontinental magic array could allow a guild to synergize its forces on the 2 continents. This guild could operate on the 2 continents as if operating on a single continent, free of the problems arising from operating on 2 different continents. This was also one reason Xueqi had been desperately working to become a Grandmaster Magician all this time. As Xueqi was quietly constructing the intercontinental magic array in the summoning tower, Divine Tribe's executives suddenly held a meeting in the guild's temporary residence in the Starlight Fortress. Phythalia, is what you say true? Can Black Flame really connect the 2 continents? Great Elder Adolphe asked in disbelief as he looked at Phythalia. When Adolphe heard that Xueqi had reached the half-step Tier 5 and world creation standards and single-handedly killed over a dozen Tier 4 NPCs, he had already been incredulous. Yet, Phythalia was now telling him that Xueqi could also create an intercontinental teleportation array. How could he possibly believe her? However, Adolphe also understood one thing very clearly: Phythalia was never one to exaggerate things. Since she had said so, then this matter was most likely true. Only, he still couldn't help seeking further confirmation from her. With Black Flame's personality, it's unlikely he would lie. Not to mention, he doesn't have any reason to lie to us, Phythalia replied after giving the matter some thought. After all, even if he can't connect the 2 continents, with the strength and potential he has displayed in the Starlight Fortress's support, should Zero Wing fall on the eastern continent, it can easily rise again on the western continent. Zero Wing won't need our support at all. That makes sense. Adolphe nodded. The Starlight Fortress had a Tier 4 divine dragon guarding it. Unless a Tier 6 god or a group of Tier 5 existences attacked the fortress, nothing could threaten the fortress. Not to mention, Xueqi was already highly likely to get promoted to Tier 5. Whether it was now or in the future, he definitely couldn't be underestimated. The reason I called everyone here is to recommend that we deepen our partnership with Zero Wing, Phythalia said as she took out a set of documents detailing the Eastern Continent situation. After sending a copy to everyone present, she continued, "This is the latest report on the Eastern Continent's state of affairs. Several more superpowers have come from the outer world recently. Although there shouldn't be any large-scale battles occurring between the outer world invaders and the Eastern Continent's natives, friction between the 2 sides will definitely occur one way or another. Meanwhile, Zero Wing's resources are extraordinary. A battle between Zero Wing and the outer world invaders is inevitable. Hence, I propose that we have some of the guild's Tier 4s head to the Eastern Continent to support Zero Wing. This way, Divine Tribe will have some initiative in future partnerships with Zero Wing." When Phythalia finished speaking, everyone present promptly nodded in agreement. Before today, They had merely treated Zero Wing as an ordinary superpower and did not put much thought into their partnership with the guild. However, after today's incident, they could no longer afford to do so. This was because Zero Wing possessed not only a half-step Tier 5 expert but also an intercontinental teleportation array linking the two continents. Once word of this teleportation array got out, the Starlight Fortress would undoubtedly become the Western continent's focal point. At that time, the Starlight Fortress's income would definitely multiply by tenfold or more. If Divine Tribe could get a cut of this pie, it would be of significant help to the guild. With Divine Tribe's foundations, the resources from the Starlight Fortress might even allow it to rival the 5 great super guilds. I don't see any problem with this. Looking at Phythalia, Adolphe pondered for a moment before saying, since we are going to help Zero Wing on the eastern continent, Phythalia, take McCaffrey and Crimson with you. The two of them should be able to help Zero Wing solve many problems. Thank you, Great Elder. Phythalia was overjoyed when she heard Adolphe's words. McCaffrey and Crimson, which were top combatants of Divine Tribe. The two of them possessed fragmented legendary items and were fully geared in epic weapons and equipment. Most importantly, both had broken through the 100% threshold of their mana bodies. Crimson Witch, in particular, had even reached the 105% completion rate. Adolphe aside, the completion rate of Crimson Witch's mana body was the highest in Divine Tribe. If not for Phythalia owning a fragmented legendary weapon, she wouldn't be a match for Crimson Witch. I'll contact the two of them in a moment. As for everything else, I'll leave it up to you, Adolphe said, nodding. Originally, Adolphe had other plans for McCaffrey and Crimson Witch. However, taking into account Zero Wing's potential, he deemed deepening Divine Tribe's relationship with Zero Wing much more valuable. Shortly after Divine Tribe's executives concluded their meeting, Xueqi completed the intercontinental teleportation array at the top of the summoning tower. Good. The spatial coordinates are stable. Now, I just need to set up a corresponding teleportation array on the eastern continent, and the two continents will be connected. Xueqi nodded in satisfaction as he looked at the intercontinental teleportation array before him. This intercontinental magic array was definitely his best creation since he began playing God's Domain. Not only did constructing this magic array require a lot of knowledge and understanding of the various elements of mana, but he also had to convert a master teleportation magic array into a grandmaster teleportation magic array. Chapter 2859. Returning to the Eastern Continent. Eastern Continent, Demon Mist Valley. What rotten luck. We actually got teleported to a forbidden land. Crimson Witch frowned as she observed the faint red mist surrounding her. Divine Tribe had conducted a thorough investigation into the forbidden lands on both continents. This was because these locations were incredibly dangerous. Current players couldn't visit them. Moreover, players would first have to exit the Forbidden Land before they could teleport out of the map. After players entered level 100+ maps, it was found that these maps possessed plenty of spatial tears and random teleportation points. Any one of these traps had a high chance of teleporting players to dangerous locations like Forbidden Lands. Hence, to reduce the chances of their important combatants dying after getting teleported forcibly to a Forbidden Land, the superpowers investigated the various Forbidden Lands and provided this information to their members. The Demon Mist Valley was one of the better-known Forbidden Lands on the Eastern Continent. The reason for its fame was the red mist shrouding the map all year round. Anyone who entered this place, even Tier 48, would have their physique and senses heavily suppressed, unable to exert even half of their normal combat power. In addition, the monsters in the Demon Mist Valley possessed incredibly powerful defense and magic resistance. The weakest monster here was a level 130 Great Lord. There were also plenty of mythic monsters and even superior mythic monsters. Even Tier 4 experts would have a very low chance of survival if they got sent to this forbidden land unprepared. Hence, the various superpowers had placed particularly great importance on the Demon Mist Valley. Our luck isn't all that bad. At least we didn't get sent to the central region. We're only at the boundary between the inner and outer regions, McCaffrey, the Silver Lion Legion's vice commander, said after checking his map. Pointing at the valley in the forest in front, he continued, "We should reach the outer region in 3 hours if we head in that direction." The Demon Mist Valley did not just prevent teleportation, but its red mist also prevented Tier 4 players from flying. In fact, even flying mounts could only walk here. Guild leader Black Flame, let us hurry out of here. We'll get surrounded by monsters if we stay for too long. At that time, leaving the Demon Mist Valley will become even more troublesome, Phythalia suggested as she looked at Xueqi. Although the red mist heavily suppressed players' perception, the monsters inside the Demon Mist Valley were unaffected. Hence, monsters would almost always notice players before players detected them. In addition, now that monsters in God's domain had gained self-awareness and greater intelligence, they would almost always ambush players in packs. Not to mention, their group was currently in the Demon Mist Valley's inner region. According to Divine Tribe's research, the chances of a superior mythic monster appearing here was quite high. Quite a number of mythic monsters also roamed the area. If their group caused a huge commotion, it could easily attract a pack of mythic monsters. Even for Tier 4 players like themselves, fighting multiple mythic monsters was very dangerous. Sure. Xueqi nodded. After arriving in the Demon Mist Valley, he had already spread his senses. Despite his perception getting suppressed to just a 2,000-yard radius, he still managed to discover 2 mythic monsters and more than 30 level 140+ Grand Lords. It would indeed be very troublesome if their small group had to fight against all these monsters. Following this, the group of 4 made their way into the valley under Xueqi's lead. Now that Xueqi's concentration had reached the Tier 5 standard and his control over mana had achieved world creation, even after walking through the valley for over an hour, the 4 did not come across a single battle. This situation confused Phythalia and the others, and they could only assume that an army of players had cleared this valley recently. However, as the group approached the outer region, the density of the monsters in the area also increased. Although Xueqi had a perception range of 2,000 yards, he still had greater difficulty finding a safe route to travel. Ha! Players? Suddenly, Xueqi detected strong mana fluctuations coming from a forest some distance ahead, indicating a battle taking place there. After advancing a little more, the group even began hearing sounds of battle. Shortly after hearing the noise, the group saw a level 145 superior mythic ranked 4-winged feathered dragon rising from the forest 1,000 yards away. The feathered dragon then used a breath attack, turning the forest within a 500-yard radius into ash. Along with the destruction of a portion of the forest, 3 figures, 1 female and 2 males, entered the sight of Xueqi's group. These 3 players were all Tier 4 players. Xueqi even recognized 2 of them. One was 16th Cloud, the second vice-guild leader of Shining Tiger. The other was the assassin Sorrowful Silence. The only reason the trio managed to survive the feathered dragon's breath attack was the Tier 4 Guardian Knight of the group. However, after taking on that breath attack, the Guardian Knight did not have much HP remaining. None of the 3 was a healer, either, so the Guardian Knight could only rely on potions to heal himself. Evidently, it wouldn't be long before they fell to the superior mythic monster. Damn it! To think we'll actually die here. 16th Cloud, who wielded a crimson staff, glared at the 4-winged feathered dragon's 60-meter-long frame with inevitable frustration. That's right. We should have fought those people outside instead. It would be much better than getting killed by this monster, Sorrowful Silence said, nodding in agreement. There's no helping it. Who would have thought we would encounter such a monster as soon as we ducked into the inner region? 16th Cloud said with a bitter smile. I guess fate really wants us dead. They had gone to great lengths to escape the Outer World experts' pursuit, running all the way from the Demon Mist Valley's outer region to the inner region. Originally, they thought they could lose those Outer World experts after hiding in the inner region. They never imagined that a superior mythic monster might be guarding the border. The 4-winged feather dragon wasn't just a superior mythic monster. It was also the realm lord of this area. Even a 20-man Tier 4 team would have difficulty fighting it under normal circumstances. What more under the Demon Mist Valley suppression? And worse, the feathered dragon could fly. There was no way to escape it. Players that encountered the feathered dragon had only 2 options. Kill it or be killed by it. There was no third option. However, before 16th Cloud and Sorrowful Silence could continue their conversation, the feathered dragon flapped its 2 sets of wings, sending countless wind blades at the 3 players. The boss did not give the trio a chance to catch a breather. Upon seeing the approaching wind blades, 16th Cloud swung her crimson staff, instantly raising a wall of flames in front of the 3. The wall of flames rose over 100 meters, blocking all the oncoming wind blades. And once the flames stopped the attacks, they transformed into a phoenix that flew toward the feathered dragon. Tier 4 Curse. Phoenix Flame. Phoenix Flame was actually a Tier 4 offensive curse. However, 16th Cloud not only utilized it as if it were a defensive curse but even switched it to offense afterward. Her mastery of this Tier 4 curse was simply superb. However, just as the phoenix was about to devour the feathered dragon, the latter suddenly let loose a deafening roar. Immediately afterward, the flames making up the phoenix got extinguished one after another. The phoenix eventually disappeared before it could reach the feathered dragon's body. Mana annihilation? 16th Cloud was thunderstruck when she saw the flames disappearing, her mind unable to accept this situation. If the flames had merely failed to damage the feathered dragon because they lacked power, she would still be able to understand it. However, as she held full control over the flames, she could tell that the flames hadn't died naturally. Instead, they got extinguished because the mana used to create and fuel them had been annihilated. How can a boss hold such a skill? This is cheating. Sorrowful Silence fell into despair as he looked at the feathered dragon. Although he didn't know the exact details of the situation because he wasn't the creator of those flames, he could tell that those flames had died due to mana annihilation. In other words, all spells would be a joke in front of the feathered dragon. Moreover, as an inferior dragon, the four-winged feathered dragon possessed incredible defense. If magical attacks were ineffective against it, it would be a nigh-invincible existence. After destroying 16th Cloud's curse, the feathered dragon flapped its wings and sent wind blades at the three players once more. It seems this is the end for us. Looking at the innumerable oncoming wind blades, 16th Cloud could only shrug helplessly and wait for death to claim her. Originally, she had hoped her Tier 4 curse would heavily injure the feathered dragon, creating an opportunity for their party to escape. However, let alone heavily injuring the feathered dragon, she couldn't even damage it. In front of an inferior dragon capable of using mana annihilation, an elementalist like herself was nothing but a joke. She was of no threat to it at all. Yet, just as the countless wind blades were about to strike 16th Cloud and the others, a magic barrier suddenly emerged from the ground before them. The barrier stopped the wind blades, releasing the trio from death's grip. Crystalline barrier? When 16th Cloud saw the shattered magic barrier in front of her, she immediately recognized the Tier 4 spell used to create it. With his keen eyes, Sorrowful Silence quickly noticed some figures emerging from the distant forest. Vice Guild Leader, there are people coming from over there. At Sorrowful Silence's words, 16th Cloud promptly turned toward the direction he indicated. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. What entered her vision were 4 people, 2 male and 2 females, emerging from the forest roughly 500 yards away. It was evident that these 4 people were responsible for the Tier 4 defensive spell that had saved their party. Black Flame. When 16th Cloud saw one of the cloaked men of the group, she couldn't help her surprise. She had met with the man known as Black Flame once before, when negotiating with Zero Wing for partnership on behalf of Shining Tiger. However, after that event, she had paid very little attention to Zero Wing, focusing it all on developing Shining Tiger's forces in the Glory Empire. If not for Xueqi having accomplished astonishing feats that shook the entirety of God's domain, she would have long since forgotten his appearance. Chapter 2860. Eastern Continent Situation. 16th Cloud and the others noticed the 3 people moving behind Xueqi and were stunned when they saw the faces of these 3 people. No way! Commander Phythalia of Divine Tribe's Divine Hymn Legion is here. Isn't Divine Tribe active only on the Western Continent? She's not here alone. Even the Silver Lion Legion's Vice Commander McCaffrey and Divine Tribe's Crimson Witch are here. Both of them are Divine Tribe's top combatants. Crimson Witch is probably the one who helped us just now. Why did they come here all of a sudden? Although Divine Tribe wasn't famous on the Eastern Continent, it was very well known on the Western Continent. The guild's development had even skyrocketed recently, and it was now in existence close to rivaling the 5 great super guilds. Naturally, Divine Tribe was many times stronger than a recently established superpower like Shining Tiger. Yet, 3 of Divine Tribe's top combatants were now here. With the ability of these 3 people, they could normally preside over the guild affairs on their own. Having the 3 of them together was akin to Divine Tribe having its trump card legion stroll down the street of a city. Unless Divine Tribe was planning an important operation, such an action would be a complete waste of manpower. However, before 16th Cloud and the others could recover from their surprise, Phythalia and McCaffrey suddenly appeared beside the 4-winged feathered dragon. Phythalia promptly brandished her long sword and bombarded the Realm Lord with a rain of sword lights. As for McCaffrey, He raised his great sword and stabbed it into the ground. Subsequently, massive great swords emerged from the ground and stabbed at the airborne feathered dragon. Compared to the Shining Tiger trio, Phythalia and McCaffrey evidently had far superior control over mana. Their ordinary Tier 4 skills nearly rivaled Tier 5 skills in power. They also perfectly coordinated their attacks, such that the feathered dragon could only defend against the attack of one and had no choice but to take the attack of the other. Minus 31,654,215. Damage exceeding 30 million appeared above the feathered dragon's head, the attack provoking a pained cry from the superior mythic. Although this amount of damage was nothing compared to the feathered dragon's nearly 20 billion HP, 16th Cloud and the others couldn't even damage the Realm Lord. And how strong! So, these are Divine Tribe's top combatants? 16th Cloud was astonished when she saw the combat prowess Phythalia and McCaffrey displayed. Although 16th Cloud recognized that she still couldn't rank at the very top of God's domain in terms of combat power, she was still a domain realm Tier 4 expert. She was also fully equipped with epic equipment. Yet, compared to Phythalia and McCaffrey, she still had a long way to go before reaching the top of God's domain. However, before Shining Tiger's trio could overcome their shock from Phythalia and McCaffrey's display of power, an overbearing sword light suddenly cut through space and sliced off one of the feathered dragon's claws. The attack wrenched an agonized shriek from the feathered dragon, and its HP instantly plunged by more than 100 million. The horrified feathered dragon immediately flapped its wings and fled the scene like a powerful storm, not daring to remain for even a moment longer. The feathered dragon was much faster than the average Tier 4 flying mount. Upon seeing this scene, 16th Cloud and the others reflexively turned toward the origin of the sword light with stunned looks on their faces. This was because the origin of this sword light was none other than Xueqi. Currently, he radiated a mana so dense that it was liquid. How is this possible? 16th Cloud gaped in shock at Xueqi. Not only did Xueqi scare a superior mythic-ranked Realm Lord away with one attack, but the strength of his mana was simply unbelievable. The density of his mana was something she had seen radiating from only Tier 5 NPCs. However, while the information Shining Tiger obtained said that Xueqi was indeed powerful to the point where he could slay Tier 4 NPCs, did not say that he was this powerful. The attack Xueqi had used to scare the feathered dragon away wasn't a skill because the attack did not create any mana fluctuations whatsoever. It was an ordinary attack executed with a combat technique. Meanwhile, seeing the feathered dragon fly away left Xueqi feeling a little frustrated. How unfortunate. The Demon Mist Valley's restraint prevented even him from flying. Hence, if a flying monster fled from him, he had no way of catching up. Not to mention, the four-winged feathered dragon was even a realm lord. This was why players had an incredibly difficult time killing mythic monsters or above in forbidden lands that prevented flight. After all, the majority of the mythic monsters in forbidden lands could fly. Unless players prepared an ambush beforehand, they could, at most, repel mythic monsters but not kill them. Are you three all right? After seeing the feathered dragon flying into the distance, Xueqi approached 16th Cloud's group and asked curiously, "This isn't a place ordinary Tier 4s can visit. Why did you come here?" Unlike the Ruined Mountain Range, which was a forbidden land only for humans, the Demon Mist Valley was a forbidden land for all life, much more dangerous than the Ruined Mountain Range. Tier 4 players traveling alone or in a small group could only explore the valley's outer region, at most. Normally, if players wished to enter the Demon Mist Valley's inner region, they needed a team of 20 Tier 4 players at the very least. Meanwhile, 16th Cloud's group only had 3 people. Entering the valley's inner region was a death sentence for them. You misunderstand us, Guild Leader Black Flame. If possible, we wouldn't have chosen to enter this place either, 16th Cloud replied with a bitter smile. The 3 of us entered this place because we had no other choice. Otherwise, the Outer World Tier 4 experts chasing us would have long since killed us. She was both Shining Tiger's second vice guild leader and a Tier 4 domain realm expert. If it were a month ago, nobody would believe her if she told them that other players were hunting her and had even driven her into a desperate situation. In fact, if 16th Cloud had come across such a situation, she definitely wouldn't tell anyone about it. Now, however, 16th Cloud did not mind revealing this matter to an outsider at all. She also didn't find it damaging to her self-esteem. On the contrary, she even felt proud about the situation. The 3 of you were actually cornered? Is the Eastern Continent situation that bad? Xueqi was surprised by 16th Cloud's words. In his previous life, Tier 4 experts remained existences that could not be underestimated, even 10 years after God's domain's launch. Even superpowers with Tier 5 and Tier 6 experts wouldn't have an easy time targeting and hunting down Tier 4 experts keen on escaping after all. There were simply far too few experts in God's domain capable of getting promoted to Tier 4, and the bare minimum requirement for players to participate in a hunt for Tier 4 players was to be Tier 4 themselves. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to catch up with and surround the targeted Tier 4 player at all. And while Tier 5 and Tier 6 experts were indeed capable of overpowering Tier 4 experts in a head-on fight, they had to track down their target first before they could do anything. Hence, even for the various superpowers, hunting down Tier 4 experts was a headache. Yet, 16th Cloud's group of 3 Tier 4 experts was actually getting hunted. This told Xueqi that the Eastern Continent was in far direr straits than what Divine Tribe's report described. Guild leader Black Flame, you must have been away from the Eastern Continent during this period, right? 16th Cloud wasn't particularly surprised by Xueqi's question. Without withholding any information, she replied. A few days ago, another 10 or so outer-world superpowers arrived on the Eastern Continent. One of these superpowers is incredibly strong, probably on the level of the 5 great superguilds. This superpower has many Tier 4s, as well as Tier 3 experts that exhibit combat power at the Tier 4 standard. Because of this superpower's appearance, the originally stable situation on the Eastern Continent changed instantly. Previously, the Tier 4 experts of the Eastern Continent superpowers could still roam the Demon Mist Valley's outer region. Now, however, let alone grinding peacefully in the outer region, we'd be fortunate not to get hunted by those outer world experts. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. When Xueqi's party of 4 had gotten several hundred yards away, Sorrowful Silence and the Tier 4 Guardian Knight turned to 16th Cloud. What should we do now? Sorrowful Silence asked. Do we wait here? Now that the 4-winged feather dragon had fled this place, they should be safe for some time. We don't have a choice. Let's follow Guild leader Black Flame, 16th Cloud replied, gritting her teeth. It might be impossible to break out of the encirclement with just the 3 of us, but with the strength of Guild leader Black Flame's group, we should have a chance. 16th Cloud and the others ran after Xueqi's group. Chapter 2861. Natives? Demon Mist Valley, Outer Region. Due to the red mist shrouding the Demon Mist Valley all year round, the Forbidden Land was very humid, abounding with lush vegetation. Unlike the plants found in the outside world, the plants here seemed self-aware as they constantly moved about slowly. This made one feel they were traversing a maze when they traveled through the valley. Damn it! Those people sure know how to run. If they'd just tamely let us kill them, we wouldn't have to suffer so much. A level 143, Tier 4 female swordsman grumbled in dissatisfaction. That might be the case, but we also have to thank these people. A level 143, Tier 4 male berserker standing beside the female swordsman said. If not for these native Tier 4 experts, we wouldn't have an opportunity to earn alliance contribution points. I guess that's true. So long as we gather a few more points, we will be able to stay in the luxury zone where those major powers stay, the female swordsman said, nodding. A hint of anticipation flashing across her eyes, she continued. I heard that the luxury zone even sells drugs that extend one's lifespan. We can also use the extra points we earn to exchange for those drugs. I've heard about them too. Normally, those things are reserved for the upper-class young masters and young ladies. Ordinary people like us have no chance to touch these things, said a middle-aged man who was a level 145, Tier 4 elementalist. Now though, those major powers have no choice but to ask professionals like us for help to take over this backwater world. It's a pity that the natives here are too inferior. Their control over mana, skills, and spells is terribly clumsy. If they were a little better, we would have more targets to hunt and more points to earn. As these Tier 4 players were chatting merrily, a party of players was eyeing them with contempt. These mercenaries really know how to dream. Do they think they can exchange for those life-extending drugs so easily? Jade Leaf commented as she looked at the bragging Tier 4 experts in disdain. Even our guild has trouble getting our hands on a few bottles, yet they think mercenaries like them can exchange for some? Jade, you can't say that. If we don't provide these people with some benefits, how would we get them to work for us? Awakened Abyss said, smiling. Moreover, Thanks to this operation, we also get to exchange for those precious life-extending drugs without limit this time. This is a rare opportunity from the higher-ups. In the world they lived in, life-extending drugs were incredibly precious items. Even children of major families like themselves had great difficulty getting their hands on a bottle. However, they could now use the Alliance contribution points they earned from killing native Tier 4 experts to exchange for these drugs, a precious opportunity, even for them. After all, who wouldn't want to live a longer life? Before Awakened Abyss could continue speaking, a level 144, Tier 4 ranger suddenly approached him in a hurry. "Commander, we found traces of a group of people. These should be auras left behind by natives," the ranger reported in a quiet tone. "3 of the auras belong to the 3 people we were pursuing earlier. Gather everyone for an ambush." Awakened Abyss commanded with a smile. "So long as we kill them once, we'll see how Shining Tiger will continue bringing their members here to grind." The main reason the Eastern Continent's native superpowers continued to survive was their Tier 4 experts leading teams into forbidden lands to grind. Killing the native superpowers' Tier 4 experts once would be more than enough to deal a heavy blow to the native superpowers, especially if the death penalty players suffered were increased. While EXP meant very little to Tier 4 players, it was a different story for weapons and equipment. If Tier 4 experts suddenly lost 2 or 3 pieces of their equipment, the native superpowers would definitely suffer heartache. It would also be very challenging for these native Tier 4 experts to recover from their losses. Understood. At Awakened Abyss's command, the ranger promptly contacted the other members of their hunting group to gather at the specified ambush point. In a woodland in the Demon Mist Valley's outer region. "If we continue running in this direction for another 4 to 5 hours, we should be able to leave the Demon Mist Valley," 16th Cloud said excitedly as she pointed at a mountain range looming in the distance. The Demon Mist Valley's terrain continuously changed. The one constant in this place was the mountains. Meanwhile, the distant mountain range was none other than the one 16th Cloud's party had passed through to enter the Forbidden Land. The sight of this same mountain range meant that their journey was nearing its end. Once they left the Demon Mist Valley, they could teleport to safety using a return scroll. At that time, the Outer World invaders wouldn't be able to chase them. Sorrowful Silence and the Tier 4 Guardian Knight also grew excited when they saw the distant mountain range. The 3 of them had been inflicted with a curse that drastically increased the death penalty they suffered, and would randomly resurrect them within the Forbidden Land. Previously, they thought that they no longer had any hope of surviving this ordeal. Now, their hopes were rekindled. It would have been incredibly difficult for their party of 3 to escape the outer region by themselves. After all, the outer region had not only Outer World players hunting them but also powerful monsters roaming everywhere. If they got entangled with monsters for too long, the resulting commotion would definitely attract the Outer World players to them. However, when following Xueqi's party of 4, they actually did not encounter a single monster. It was as if those monsters had vanished from the map. They had to marvel at Xueqi's party's heaven-defying luck. Now, all they needed to do was run to that distant mountain range. After that, they would be able to fly freely in the sky like birds. However, when the 7 arrived at the foot of the mountain range, a magic barrier suddenly enveloped them. Given its 1,000-yard radius, one could easily tell that it was at the master standard. Even superior mythic monsters would have difficulty breaking out of it. Not good. We got fooled. 16th Cloud's complexion paled when she saw the barrier forming. She had thought that they had already shaken off the Outer World players' pursuit. Evidently, these Outer Worlders had simply waited for them to throw themselves into this trap. With this area sealed with a master magic barrier, they had no hope of escaping whatsoever. Just then, a savage and brawny level 145 man emerged from the forest in front of Xueqi's group and said with a sadistic look, "You people have made me wait for a very long time. Let's see how you get out of this situation now." The last time his hunting group had come across Shining Tiger's party, it should have succeeded in annihilating the trio. However, the instant 16th Cloud noticed the ambush, she had decisively fled with her party before his hunting group could trap them with a barrier. This time, his hunting group had discovered traces of 16th Cloud's party early, and managed to discern where the party was heading. And with this information, his hunting group could easily set up an ambush. At this time, 16th Cloud couldn't help looking at Xueqi with guilt. Guild leader Black Flame, this is all my fault. If I had suggested we take another exit, they wouldn't have caught us. The Demon Mist Valley didn't have just one exit. Had they chosen any of the other exits instead, they wouldn't have gotten trapped. Vice Commander Cloud, you don't need to blame yourself, Xuefeng said, shaking his head. After all, I was the one who asked you to find the nearest exit. Even if you didn't guide us, we would have had to clean up these hindrances sooner or later. Upon hearing Xuefeng's words, the approaching brawny man automatically frowned. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, clean up us hindrances? What big words you have there. Commander Eagle, why are you wasting time speaking with these people? These ignorant natives just don't know how large the gap between them and us is. Let's just get rid of them now. Xuefeng's words enraged the outer world players surrounding his party. In their opinion, the residents of this god's domain were no different from natives living in an undeveloped wilderness. Yet, these natives weren't kneeling and begging them for mercy but even treating them like annoying flies. Such arrogance was beyond salvation. However, while the Outer World Hunting Group's 30-plus Tier 4 experts and 100-plus Tier 3 experts were raising a ruckus, the brawny man leading them turned his gaze toward Awakened Abyss's group. Commander Abyss, you're finally here. May I know if your group will be taking action, or will you leave it to us? Chapter 2862, Hunter? Or Hunted? Quasi-Eagle's words agitated the Tier 4 experts around him so much that they wished they could charge forward and finish off the 7 native players in front of them immediately. Currently, the Alliance's price for native Tier 4 experts was 300 contribution points per kill. If a curse was used on the kill, they would receive 1,000 points. These prices represented a fortune, even for the Luxury Zone's residents, let alone residents of the Commoner Zone like themselves. If converted into income, 1,000 Alliance contribution points were equivalent to 10 years of salary for an ordinary person living in the Luxury Zone. Indeed, the Interstellar Alliance's bounty for native Tier 4s was that high. This demonstrated the Interstellar Alliance's determination in acquiring this god's domain. More importantly, Alliance contribution points could be exchanged for money but not vice versa. Meanwhile, Alliance contribution points could be used to exchange for many items and resources that normally could not be bought with money. Hence, the 7 Tier 4 players in front of them were basically walking treasure troves. Even if they split the points among their group, they would still earn a significant income. However, Awakened Abyss did not respond to Quasi-Eagle's question. Instead, he stared at the group of native players in front of him. More precisely, he was looking at the cloaked man standing at the head of this group. Despite being surrounded by over 100 Tier 4 combatants and suppressed by a master magic array, this cloaked man remained incredibly calm. Guild Leader Black Flame. You've really made me search for you. Awakened Abyss ignored everyone around him, focusing solely on Xuefeng, the words he uttered carrying endless rage and killing intent. Although Awakened Abyss had eventually gotten rescued from Sky Spring City's prison, his reputation in the guild had still plummeted. As a result, despite being one of the guild's top 3 talents, he had no choice but to complete a bunch of meaningless missions, such as hunting down Shining Tiger's Tier 4 experts. Hence, Awakened Abyss bore deep hatred for Xuefeng. Only, after the world passage opened, he had not obtained any information on Xuefeng's whereabouts, so he had no opportunity to reclaim his honor. However, Xuefeng ignored Awakened Abyss's anger and hatred entirely. Looking at the young man, Xuefeng said calmly, "So, it's Commander Abyss of 100 Ghosts. It seems you've improved a lot since we last met." Awakened Abyss was evidently much stronger than when Xuefeng saw him in Sky Spring City. The young man had not only reached level 145 but even broken through the 100% threshold of his mana body. His mana body's completion rate definitely rivaled Phythalia's. Most importantly, aside from sporting epic set equipment, Awakened Abyss also had 3 fragmented legendary items on him. Given that he was at the domain realm and had gotten far in the realms of truth, the combat power he could display was most likely superior to the average Tier 4 NPCs. That's right. This is all thanks to you, Guild Leader Black Flame. Awakened Abyss gnashed his teeth at Xuefeng's words. Since we had the fortune of meeting today, how about we? 11 Just as Awakened Abyss was about to propose a duel, Jade Leaf hurriedly tugged his sleeve and said quietly, "Abyss, don't mess around. His strength has already reached monstrous levels. Moreover, the Elder told you that now still isn't the time for us to make an enemy of Black Flame." Awakened Abyss had been imprisoned in Sky Spring City, so he had not witnessed the battle outside the secret Covenant Tower. Back then, not only did Xuefeng single-handedly slay hundreds of weakened Tier 4 foe Saint Saboteurs as if he was cutting up a bunch of vegetables, but he also revealed extraordinary trump cards. Xuefeng also possessed an incredibly powerful mana domain. When he deployed his mana domain, none of the foe Saint Saboteurs managed to exhibit more than half of their usual combat power. While one of the reasons Windshadow had chosen to surrender to Zero Wing was indeed the mobile fortress's threat, a larger part was Xuefeng's trump cards. Hence, he had chosen to surrender and compensate Zero Wing. Although their hunting group currently had a significant advantage in numbers and even had a master magic array suppressing Xuefeng, Jade Leaf still couldn't see their group having any chance of victory against Xuefeng's party. At Jade Leaf's reminder, Awakened Abyss gradually cooled down. I know. Although Awakened Abyss wanted nothing more than to kill Xuefeng right now, his circumstances were no longer the same as before. He could no longer afford to act willfully. Take Jade Leaf, for example. In addition to protecting him, she was also tasked with supervising him. If Awakened Abyss dared defy Windshadow's command and Jade Leaf reported his disobedience, it wouldn't matter whether he managed to kill Xuefeng or not. Nothing good would come of it. In fact, he might get even more marginalized in the guild. After Awakened Abyss finished his conversation with Jade Leaf, he turned to Quasi-Eagle. Commander Eagle, remove the barrier. We're leaving. At Awakened Abyss's words, Quasi-Eagle and the other Tier 4 experts of the hunting party were all stunned. What's going on? 16th Cloud also goggled in shock. She couldn't understand why the situation had taken such an unexpected turn. While she wasn't aware of the history between Awakened Abyss and Xuefeng, she could tell from the anger and hatred Awakened Abyss had displayed toward Xuefeng a moment ago that Awakened Abyss wouldn't let them go. In fact, it was already incredible that Awakened Abyss did not take action immediately. Yet, Awakened Abyss was now saying to let them go. If not for her clearly sensing the resentment Awakened Abyss radiated, she would even suspect that Awakened Abyss had merely been feigning anger before, and that he actually had an excellent relationship with Xuefeng. Let alone 16th Cloud. Even Xuefeng found the situation surprising. He couldn't help wondering if Awakened Abyss had blown a fuse or two in his brain from his previous outburst and had a slip of the tongue. Commander Abyss, what are you saying? Looking at Awakened Abyss in confusion, Quasi-Eagle asked, We've expended so much manpower and resources to hunt them down, yet you want us to just release them? It wasn't easy to hunt down and surround the native superpowers Tier 4 experts, who were now operating very cautiously. If it were before, they would have required a team of only a dozen or so Tier 4 combatants to hunt down a handful of native Tier 4s. Now, they needed to mobilize over 100 Tier 4 combatants just for 3 of Shining Tiger's Tier 4 experts. Since their hunting group had surrounded 7 Tier 4 experts, for more than expected, they would make a fortune if they simply finished the job. Yet, Awakened Abyss was telling them to let these Tier 4 experts go. For a moment, Quasi-Eagle suspected that Awakened Abyss had gone crazy. In response, Awakened Abyss clenched his fists and repeated, Yes, let them go. 16th Cloud and her 2 guildmates heaved a deep sigh of relief at Awakened Abyss's affirmation. Although they didn't know why such a situation was happening or who exactly Awakened Abyss was, Awakened Abyss appeared to be the leader of this hunting group. And since the leader had spoken, her party should be safe. However, contrary to the Shining Tiger Trio's expectations, Quasi-Eagle, the mercenaries' leader, behaved as if he had not heard Awakened Abyss's command. He didn't call off his subordinates or remove the Master Magic Array. Sorry, but I cannot listen to your words, Commander Abyss. I don't know what kind of relationship you have with this guild leader Black Flame, but I need to take care of my brothers. We went to great lengths to trap these people in a barrier. If we let them go now, my brothers will have nothing to eat. Looking at Awakened Abyss, Quasi-Eagle smiled faintly and said, Since you are unwilling to take action, we will do it instead. If you can't bear to watch, you can shut your eyes and stand aside. I promise we won't let your friends suffer and we'll finish the battle quickly. I support you, boss. Commander Abyss, even if you're the leader, you have to ask our weapons first whether we agree with your commands. That's right. Commander Abyss, if you can't bear to attack your friend, just stand aside. The other mercenaries promptly voiced their agreement with Quasi-Eagle. Players like them relied on bounties to make a living. Now that they had found themselves a big catch, there was no way they would let their prey get away. Chapter 2863. Peerless Overlord World Creation. How is this possible? 16th Cloud gaped in shock when she saw the magic barrier disappear and the pressure weighing down her body vanished. She simply couldn't bring herself to believe this situation. Even acquiring a mana domain was already tough for Tier 4 players. Anyone who managed to do so would become an absolute powerhouse among Tier 4 existences. Meanwhile, world creation was something even Tier 5 existences had difficulty achieving. Anyone who reached the world creation standard could create a small world of their own, which was much more powerful than a barrier created using a magic array. It was akin to a passive, large-scale magic barrier. What was even more amazing was that the owner of this small world could isolate enemies from the ambient mana. So long as the trapped enemies had yet to reach Tier 5 or the world creation standard or did not possess fragmented legendary items capable of countering a world creation mana domain, resisting the owner of the small world was impossible. In front of a world creation expert, Tier 4 experts were hardly any different from Tier 2 and Tier 3 players. They just had stronger basic attributes and physiques. Let alone 16th Cloud. Even Awakened Abyss and Jade Leaf were stunned by this situation. How can he be at the world creation level already? Isn't he just a native? Awakened Abyss couldn't believe his eyes as he looked at Xueqi. Even in the god's domain they came from, only experts standing at the apex of the world had reached the world creation standard, all of them old monsters belonging to the few transcendental powers. However, Xueqi's appearance indicated he was only 30, at most. Moreover, the god's domain he lived in was not only sparse in mana but also lacking in legacies. No matter how Awakened Abyss looked at it, there was no way anyone in this god's domain could achieve such strength at this stage of the game. So, this is his hidden strength? Jade Leaf was horrified by this revelation. Previously, when Wind Shadow told her that Xueqi was still hiding a lot of his strength and that they needed to be careful around him, she hadn't thought much of his warning. She had reminded Awakened Abyss to avoid clashing with Xueqi simply because she did not want to disobey Wind Shadow's orders. However, after Xueqi revealed his hidden strength, Jade Leaf found him much scarier than even Wind Shadow's predictions. The next moment, before Quasi-Eagle and the other mercenaries could snap out of their daze, Xueqi's Light of Two Worlds swung toward them. Tier 4 skill. Lightning Edge. Countless sword lights descended from the sky, creating a mesmerizing river of light. Quasi-Eagle and the other mercenaries indeed possessed combat power at the Tier 4 standard. Moreover, even the weakest Tier 3 expert among them was at the Refinement Realm standard. However, since they couldn't tap the ambient mana, none of the defensive maneuvers and life-saving skills they used could withstand Xueqi's attack. As a result, apart from Quasi-Eagle and a Tier 4 Elementalist, both of whom had broken through the 100% threshold of their mana bodies, everyone else lost their lives to the sword lights. When the River of Light disappeared, a ravine dozens of meters deep and nearly 1,000 meters long had formed in the forested region, with weapons and equipment strewn inside it. How is this possible? Quasi-Eagle, who had survived thanks to a Tier 4 defensive skill, was stupefied when he saw most of his team of more than 100 Tier 4 combatants wiped out. When he and the surviving Elementalist looked at Xueqi again, they shuddered involuntarily, horror swamping their hearts. The two of them finally understood that what Xueqi had said earlier was true. From start to end, their team had merely been a bunch of clowns. They arrogantly thought of Xueqi's group as sheep for the slaughter, not knowing that they themselves were the actual sheep. World creation. No wonder Awakened Abyss conceded without hesitation. Quasi-Eagle smiled bitterly as he looked at Xueqi. The loss of levels was a small matter for Tier 4 players like them. However, the loss of weapons and equipment wasn't something that they could recover from easily. Boss, what should we do? The level 144, Tier 4 male elementalist asked Quasi-Eagle in a panic. There's no way we can get away from him inside this small world. We also can't fly inside the Demon Mist Valley. Once a world creation expert unleashed their mana domain, escape was impossible, especially for players like themselves. At the elementalist's question, Quasi-Eagle gritted his teeth and said to Xueqi, "Friend, my brother and I surrender. We are willing to compensate you with 2 pieces of top-tier epic equipment for each of us. What do you think?" Quasi-Eagle's proposal surprised Awakened Abyss and the other 100 Ghosts members. The commander of the Wild Hunt mercenary group was considered above average among the Tier 4 experts in their god's domain. For him to actually bow down to another was simply unbelievable. Quasi-Eagle was known to be a ruthless person in their god's domain. He had once gone up against a guild all by himself. Despite getting killed more than a dozen times, he still did not give up clashing with the guild. Eventually, the guild in question suffered a major loss in a guild war. And with Quasi-Eagle incessantly targeting the guild's experts, the guild had no choice but to concede and provide all sorts of compensation to Quasi-Eagle to put this feud to rest. This incident had spurred Quasi-Eagle's rise to fame. He had then gone on to establish the present Wild Hunt mercenary group, which had a reputation as a pack of mad dogs in their god's domain. Yet, Quasi-Eagle was actually taking the initiative to admit defeat after suffering such a small setback. How could Awakened Abyss and the others not find the situation surprising? Unfortunately, Xueqi showed no interest whatsoever in Quasi-Eagle's proposal. 3 pieces. We'll pay 3 pieces of epic equipment each. Quasi-Eagle said, gritting his teeth. Even if you kill us, the most we will drop is 2 items each. Top-tier epic equipment is rare even in the present god's domain. This is definitely a worthwhile transaction for you. Normally, Quasi-Eagle wouldn't have minded getting killed. However, he currently had a precious treasure on his person, and it had a certain chance of dropping upon death. It was precisely thanks to this treasure that he had managed to break through his mana body's 100% threshold. Meanwhile, this was only the tip of the iceberg of what this treasure had to offer. Although he didn't know what exactly this treasure was, since it had such an ability, it was definitely more valuable than even fragmented legendary items. He naturally wouldn't dare bet on the chance that it wouldn't drop. Hence, he endured the humiliation of surrendering. However, before Quasi-Eagle could finish speaking, Xueqi had already slashed out with the abyssal blade. First sword. Light Shadow. You lunatic! When Quasi-Eagle and the elementalist saw the towering great sword descending toward them, they promptly activated another life-saving skill. The two of them then fled in different directions, neither daring to receive the descending great sword. They could clearly sense the frightening power the illusory great sword carried. This attack was most likely much stronger than even that of superior mythic monsters. Receiving it would be suicide. 1 slash. 2 slashes. 3 slashes. As Quasi-Eagle and the Tier 4 elementalist used up one life-saving skill after another, Xueqi executed Light Shadow time and again. After 5 consecutive slashes, Quasi-Eagle and the elementalist finally fell to the illusory great sword and transformed into ashes, each of them dropping 2 items as they died. This scene rendered Awakened Abyss and Jade Leaf speechless for a long time. So, this is the power of world creation? 16th Cloud similarly found herself at a loss for words when she saw Quasi-Eagle getting killed in just a few moves. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Her party of 3 had previously clashed with the mercenary commander. Despite the 3 of them working together to fight him, they were still at a disadvantage. Yet, Xueqi had overwhelmed Quasi-Eagle and another Tier 4 expert, who had also broken through the 100% threshold of his mana body, so much that the 2 couldn't even retaliate. Afterward, Xueqi collected the loot from Wild Hunt, then glanced at 100 Ghosts' group. Awakened Abyss and the dozen or so Tier 4 experts around him shuddered involuntarily. A few of them even stumbled 2 steps back. Xueqi turned to 16th Cloud and the others. Let's go! Leaving behind the petrified members of 100 Ghosts, Xueqi led 16th Cloud and the others straight out of the Demon Mist Valley. Chapter 2864. Astonishing Zero Wing, he's finally gone. Jade Leaf heaved a deep sigh of relief when Xueqi's group disappeared into the distance. Previously, she thought that Xueqi would take action against them. Although they weren't afraid of getting killed, losing equipment would still impact them to a certain extent. Black Flame. Awakened Abyss glared at the distant sky. Just you wait. I'll get back at you one day. Although Xueqi was indeed powerful, he wasn't an invincible existence. This was especially true in the War of Worlds. Let alone Tier 4 world creation experts, even Tier 5 NPCs were incapable of stopping their invasion. Otherwise, so many kingdoms on the eastern continent wouldn't have fallen so soon after the War of Worlds began. Now, while it might seem like both sides had reached a balance, they were merely accumulating their strength. Moreover, it wouldn't be long before the next large-scale operation began. Abyss, you'd better not mess around. Black Flame is much scarier than we initially expected. If you disrupt the Alliance's plans, even Elder Windshadow won't be able to protect you, Jade Leaf warned. What we need to do now is notify the Elder about Black Flame as soon as possible. Although a peerless overlord like Xueqi couldn't affect the overall situation of the war between the two gods' domains, he could still affect the outcome of some war theaters. I know. Awakened Abyss nodded. After this operation, I'll return to headquarters and apply for a trial slot. You'll apply for the trial now? Isn't it too soon? Jade Leaf asked in surprise. The god's domain they came from was different from this god's domain. Their world had plenty of legacies. One of the more valuable legacies 100 Ghosts possessed was an ancient trial, and the entry slots for this trial were generally reserved for the guild's top talents. However, while this ancient trial could provide significant growth to players, it also came with significant risks. Failure would put players' souls into a weakened state for a long period. Moreover, every top talent in the guild had only one opportunity to challenge this trial. If I can improve my strength now, I can earn more contribution points in the upcoming war. So long as I accumulate enough points, I can just exchange for another trial slot. Awakened Abyss had long considered challenging the ancient trial. The Interstellar Alliance was adamant in acquiring the Eastern continent. Hence, it had offered incredibly lavish rewards to those willing to contribute to this cause. With his status as one of 100 Ghosts' peerless geniuses, acquiring another slot for future use wouldn't be difficult so long as he made enough contributions in the war. His only problem was that he needed to achieve world creation in this trial. Previously, Awakened Abyss had only heard rumors regarding the strength of world creation, but he hadn't known exactly how powerful the ability to create a small world was. However, after seeing Xueqi's battle, he finally understood the power of world creation. This was why he had decided to challenge the trial ahead of time. Arctic Canyon, Zero Wing City. Several bright flashes appeared above the teleportation array inside Zero Wing City's teleportation hall as Xueqi's party of 7 teleported into the city. So, this is Zero Wing City? 16th Cloud was astonished when she arrived inside the teleportation hall. What incredibly dense mana. Although she had long since heard rumors that Zero Wing City's mana was extraordinary, she found that the city was even more amazing than the rumors had depicted it to be. Zero Wing City was bustling with people. All sorts of NPC merchants and NPC nobles were walking down the street outside the teleportation hall. She spotted even Tier 4 NPCs wandering the city. If not for her coming to Zero Wing City to sign a partnership contract with Zero Wing on behalf of Shining Tiger, she would have never realized that Zero Wing City was such an amazing place. Phythalia, McCaffrey, and Crimson which were also shocked by the city. Not only did Zero Wing City possess superior mana to the Starlight Fortresses, but its security standard was also incredible. There were even Tier 4 NPCs patrolling the city. Zero Wing City's security standard was something no other guild city in God's domain could even imagine having. While the various superpowers boasted Tier 4 NPCs of their own, these NPCs were personal guards the various superpowers nurtured. The superpowers treated every one of these NPCs as their most precious combatants, normally using them to defend entire towns or cities single-handedly. However, in Zero Wing City, Tier 4 NPCs were actually tasked with leading patrol squads. Moreover, there wasn't just one such patrol squad patrolling the city streets but many. The Tier 4 NPCs that were precious in the eyes of the various superpowers were no different from cabbages in Zero Wing City. Xueqi, though, did not find the situation particularly surprising. Zero Wing City was currently the only main guild city in God's domain. It was even situated in the Arctic Canyon, a high-level neutral map. The number of Tier 4 NPCs seeking to develop themselves here would naturally be significant. Hence, Zero Wing City could recruit a group of Tier 4 NPCs to serve as soldiers. Not to mention, Zero Wing City's mana environment rivaled that of the ancient god's domain, making the city even more attractive to Tier 4 NPCs. After all, if one wished to develop themselves further, one would need to improve one's understanding of mana. However, Xueqi had to admit that Zero Wing City had truly made significant progress while he was gone. Not only had the strength of the city's NPC soldiers improved, but even the players occupying the city had grown stronger. Now the players here were all Tier 3 or above, with even the lowest leveled among them at level 136. He had even noticed quite a few Tier 4 players in the city. On the way from the teleportation hall to Zero Wing's residence, Xueqi had spotted more than 10 Tier 4 players, which meant that Zero Wing City was even more prosperous than the Starlight Fortress. After all, any player capable of entering Zero Wing City now was a member of either Zero Wing or one of the guild's partners, and this drastically reduced the number of players capable of entering the city. Apart from that, the number of Zero Wing's members present in the city had reached an incredible number. When Zero Wing City was first opened after its promotion to main city, only several tens of thousands of Zero Wing members had entered it. Yet, according to the information Xueqi received from the guild residents, there were more than 500,000 Zero Wing members in the city now. Given that one needed to be at least Tier 3 to operate around Zero Wing City, Zero Wing currently had at least 500,000 Tier 3 players under its command. This number definitely surpassed that of ordinary superpowers by a large margin and rivaled what super guilds had. Guild leader, this is our guild's latest development report, Liang Jing said with a hint of pride as she handed Xueqi a statistics report. Although a lot of things had occurred on the eastern continent during Xueqi's absence, because of the mobile fortress and 3 guild cities, Zero Wing managed to hurdle most of these problems. In fact, during the War of Worlds, Zero Wing City had practically become a shelter that all players sought to enter. Many annihilated guilds and wandering adventurer teams had chosen to join Zero Wing, which resulted in Zero Wing's member count skyrocketing. If not for resource limitations, the guild's member count would have most likely doubled by B now/B. Amazing. Xueqi was astounded when he read the numbers on the report. At present, Zero Wing's total Tier 3 member count already exceeded 800,000, more than 500,000 of which were operating in Zero Wing City. The rest were operating in Stone Forest City, Silver Wing City, and the Mobile Fortress. However, this still wasn't the most astonishing part. What was more important was that Zero Wing now had 73 Tier 4 players under its command. This number was even higher than what the average super guild had. For a moment, Xueqi even wondered if he had returned to the wrong guild. After all, super first-rate guilds currently had only a dozen or so Tier 4 players, with stronger ones having 20. Super guilds had only around 30 or 40. Only existences like the 5 great super guilds had over 70 Tier 4 experts. Moreover, according to Liang Jing's report, Zero Wing still had over 40 players stuck inside their respective Tier 4 legacy lands, and half of them were expected to succeed in their promotion. In other words, Zero Wing would soon have over 100 Tier 4 experts under its command. Of course, the main reason Zero Wing could produce such frightening numbers was Zero Wing City's environment. The environment here allowed players to continuously improve their knowledge of and control over mana. Looking at Xueqi's surprised expression, Liang Jing suggested, "Guild leader, several more outer-world superpowers arrived on the eastern continent recently, and some of the eastern continent superpowers got annihilated as a consequence. I think we should absorb the Tier 3 and Tier 4 players of these fallen superpowers. Since our income of resources has reached a bottleneck, and we can support only so many guild members with what we currently have, I wish to open Zero Wing City further. With the city's advantages, we can easily acquire even more resources. Then, we can recruit more experts into Zero Wing." Xueqi nodded in agreement with Liang Jing's suggestion. The War of Worlds was indeed a scary event, but it was also a good opportunity for development. This was because the moment the world passage opened, the players of the 2 gods' domains were enemies. Not only were players from the 2 gods' domains incapable of adding each other as friends, but they couldn't communicate with each other through the system, either. Read latest chapters at Xueqi World. EU. In addition, players of the 2 worlds could kill each other without accumulating any crime value. In fact, native players would even receive gifts and EXP from killing outer-world players, albeit significantly lower EXP than the EXP awarded for killing monsters and NPCs. Most importantly, native players couldn't join outer-world guilds and vice versa. Hence, native forces were the only option available to members of fallen superpowers. We should indeed open Zero Wing City further to the public. Smiling, Xueqi added, "Before that though, we still need to do something." "We still need to do something?" Liang Jing parroted in confusion. In her opinion, Zero Wing had already done everything possible and reached its current development limit. To expand its forces further, the only option it had was to open up Zero Wing City. As for Zero Wing's other territories, developing them any further was impossible at present. "That's right." Nodding, Xueqi took out a document and said, "Prepare the materials on this list for me. I need them immediately." Further opening Zero Wing City to the public was a must. However, before doing so, He needed to complete the intercontinental teleportation array. With it, the city's opening would generate much better results. Chapter 2865. Special loot. After Liang Jing left the room to prepare the listed materials, Shifeng finally had time to sort through the loot from the Outer World players. Even the weakest among Quasi-Eagle's group was a Tier 3 player with Tier 4 combat power, so they all possessed excellent equipment, especially those Tier 3 players. If he could gather a complete set of their equipment, he would be able to increase Zero Wing's number of Tier 4 combatants by 1. As Shifeng inspected the loot, he couldn't help feeling some awe at the Outer World players' equipment. Every one of those Tier 3 experts was actually geared in Tier 3 mana set equipment. In the current God's domain, a full set could easily sell for over 10,000 gold. However, compared to the Tier 4 experts' loot, the Tier 3 experts' loot was inferior by a large margin. Even the worst item dropped by the Tier 4 Outer World players was level 150 epic equipment. Some of them had even dropped parts of epic set equipment. Judging by the loot, Shifeng could say with certainty that these Tier 4 Outer World players were using full sets of epic set equipment. Even the current Zero Wing didn't have epic set equipment. Setting aside how rare epic set equipment was, even if one found a way to obtain a set, one would still have to expend an incredible amount of time and manpower to acquire the full set. After all, there was no way to gather a full set just by killing one type of boss monster. One would have to kill multiple types of bosses. Moreover, these bosses were not guaranteed to drop the equipment one desired. In other words, if one didn't kill a large number and variety of bosses, gathering a complete set of epic set equipment would be impossible. Meanwhile, killing a bunch of level 150 mythic ranked bosses was a task that required a large number of Tier 4 players. Of course, one part of an epic set equipment from the Outer World players didn't prove anything. However, Shifeng didn't have just one part but 5. Moreover, this was merely the loot he got from killing Tier 4 experts of an Outer World mercenary group. He could easily imagine how excellent the equipment of the Outer World superpowers Tier 4 experts was and how many Tier 4 experts these superpowers possessed. Otherwise, it would be impossible for a measly mercenary group to gather so much epic set equipment. No wonder the Eastern Continent superpowers are powerless to retaliate. In terms of equipment standards alone, they are already behind by more than half a year. Not to mention, there is also the massive difference in the number of Tier 4 experts. Shifeng's head ached as he looked at the items before him. Originally, he thought that the difference between Earth's God's domain and the interstellar continent's God's domain lay only in the number of Tier 4 experts and combat techniques they possessed. Now, he found that there was a massive gap even in weapons and equipment. He had to admit that the threat level of the Outer World's players and forces exceeded his expectations. After all, even now, Zero Wing could manufacture only individual pieces of epic equipment. Moreover, the production volume was incredibly low since only a handful of players could make them. And worse, according to the statistics report regarding Zero Wing's Tier 4 members, less than 30% of them were currently equipped with 5 or more pieces of level 150 epic equipment. The rest had only 3 or so pieces of level 150 epic equipment on average. As for epic set equipment, dream on. Zero Wing's Tier 4 experts had that many pieces of level 150 epic equipment mainly because of the Arctic Canyon. In addition, Yenya and Cleansing Whistle had returned from the Ancient God's domain with a large number of level 150 epic equipment. If not for these factors, Zero Wing's Tier 4 experts would be even more poorly equipped right now. However, it wasn't exactly accurate to describe Zero Wing's Tier 4 experts as poorly equipped. At the very least, they were much better equipped than the native superpowers Tier 4 experts. They were only inferior when compared to the Outer World's Tier 4 experts. It seems I'll have to start acquiring some top-tier epic weapons and equipment once I finish setting up the intercontinental teleportation array. Otherwise, even if we have enough Tier 4 experts, we still won't be able to go up against the Outer World superpowers. While it was indeed important for one to acquire legacy guidances and improve one's control over mana after reaching Tier 4, that didn't mean one could just ignore one's weapons and equipment. After all, there was at least a 20% difference in basic attributes between a full set of disparate epic equipment and a full set of epic set equipment. This difference would become even more significant with amplification by skills and mana control. After Shifeng finished inspecting the weapons and equipment dropped, he set his sights on a shabby, crystalline statue. When he inspected the statue though, he was stunned. An eternal item? No matter how he looked at the crystalline statue, it appeared ordinary. Yet, when he tried inspecting it, he actually failed to get any information. All he got was a bunch of unknowns. Moreover, when he carefully spread his senses around the statue, he felt an urge to devour this statue, just like when he received the World Stone from Phoenix Rain. Immediately, Xueqi activated omniscient eyes to identify the statue. Due to his mana body having reached the 120% threshold, omniscient eyes took less than 30 seconds to finish the appraisal. Origin Statue, Eternal Item, Effect 1. Guides the principle of all things. Effect 2. Indestructible Object. Guides the principle of all things? Xueqi was momentarily confused by the item description. The World Stone's description stated that it could stabilize the principle of all things. It had allowed him to log in and out of the game freely while in the ancient god's domain. However, what did the system mean by guiding the principle of all things? Just as Xueqi was wondering about the origin statue's function, Liang Jing contacted him. Guild leader, I've prepared the materials you asked for. I can have them delivered to the teleportation hall now. Okay. I'll head over right away. At Liang Jing's report, Xueqi stopped studying the origin statue in his hand. After casually storing it in his bag, he hurried to the teleportation hall to strengthen the existing teleportation array. Only with the modification could the teleportation array manipulate enough mana to connect with the Western Continent spatial node and form a stable teleportation channel. And once a stable channel was established, easy travel between the two continents would become possible. He would no longer have to trouble himself with searching for unreliable ancient teleportation arrays. Zero Wing City, Battle Arena. The Battle Arena covered an area of several sports stadiums. Presently, the establishment was crowded with players, and even Tier 4 players were waiting in line to reserve a combat room. The liveliness here was even more exaggerated than the auction houses of imperial capitals. Looking at McCaffrey and Crimson Witch, who had just exited a combat room, Phythalia asked curiously, Afrey, what do you think of the combat room's effects? Initially, they had visited the Eastern Continent to assist Zero Wing and deepen the relationship between Divine Tribe and Zero Wing. However, after experiencing Zero Wing City's mana, they couldn't suppress their curiosity about the effects of training in such an environment. Hence, they came to this place to sate their curiosity. After all, the battle arena was the only place in Zero Wing City that allowed players to do combat. How should I put it? After pondering for a moment and mentally sorting his words, McCaffrey said, if the Starlight Fortress's training efficiency is a 10, then this place is above 30. Isn't that too much of an exaggeration? Phythalia couldn't help feeling skeptical of McCaffrey's evaluation. Although she knew that McCaffrey was an austere person and that Zero Wing City's environment was extraordinary, McCaffrey's evaluation of the city's training effect was simply too exaggerated in her opinion. For players of their caliber, the quality of their training environment would need to be significantly better for them to see any improvements to their training efficiency. Hence, no matter how excellent Zero Wing City's environment was, she couldn't bring herself to believe that someone like McCaffrey would see his training efficiency triple. No. It's not an exaggeration. Commander Phythalia, although the mana here isn't misty, when you start manipulating the ambient mana, you'll discover that its density is actually much greater than the mana mist you find in the outside world, Crimson Witch insisted earnestly. If you fight against an expert of the same caliber in this environment, the insights you can get are on a completely different level. This is especially true for your control over mana. I really don't know how Zero Wing accomplished this. They actually managed to let a guild city have such dense mana. You can even view the operating principles of mana with such high clarity. She's right. If I can train here, I'm confident I can further improve my mana body in less than 10 days, McCaffrey said, nodding. He then looked enviously at the Zero Wing members in the building. The Divine Tribe trio had the fortune of visiting Zero Wing City only because they had followed Xueqi to the Eastern Continent. If not for Xueqi granting them access, they wouldn't have been able to enter the city. They also wouldn't have realized how astonishing the city's environment was. Meanwhile, Zero Wing's members could actually enjoy the environment here every day. How could he not envy them? At his current standard, increasing his mana body's completion rate by even 1% was incredibly challenging. Yet, in Zero Wing City, he saw the chance to improve his mana body rapidly. A glimmer appeared in Crimson Witch's eyes as she insisted, Commander Phythalia, We must recommend establishing a temporary residence in Zero Wing City to the Grand Elders and Guild Leader once we return. It doesn't matter even if we have to pay a significant price. The short-term effects might not be obvious, but the long-term benefits for the guild are absolutely unimaginable. Surpassing the 5 great super guilds might even become possible. Phythalia smiled wryly at Crimson Witch's strong recommendation. I want to, but once the intercontinental teleportation array is activated, I'm afraid it'll become difficult for Divine Tribe to secure a temporary residence. Once Zero Wing's intercontinental teleportation array began operating, so long as the 2 continent superpowers were not stupid, they would understand just how valuable Zero Wing City was, not to mention the extraordinary mana environment in this place. She could easily imagine how many superpowers would seek to garrison Zero Wing City at that time. No. You can't say that, Commander Phythalia. Looking at Phythalia, McCaffrey suddenly smiled and said, I heard that Black Flame lives in Yuantian City's upper zone. With your family's influence and connections, if you personally paid him a visit, wouldn't he agree to a partnership immediately? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Phythalia was a potential successor of a powerful family based in the upper zone. Her beauty and figure in the real world were also at the level of toppling nations. If she personally visited someone in the upper zone and sincerely proposed a partnership, hardly anyone in the upper zone would refuse her. Upon hearing McCaffrey's suggestion, Crimson Witch nodded in agreement. You too. Phythalia sputtered, rendered speechless by her 2 companions. However, before Phythalia could say anything more, a sudden commotion came from outside the battle arena. Then, the manner in the city grew violent and irritable. When Phythalia and her companions walked out of the lobby, they promptly noticed a tower of light rising from the teleportation hall's direction. Chapter 2866. Astonishing transformation, it's done. Xueqi grew ecstatic as he took in the pillar of light rising from the teleportation array in front of him. Previously, he had indeed been certain that he could strengthen the teleportation array until it could handle enough mana to support a teleportation channel connecting the 2 continents. However, when he began working, he started to have doubts. After all, the teleportation channel had to span not only the distance between the 2 continents but also the distance between the western continent's edge and the Starlight Fortress, which was nowhere near the ocean. If the teleportation array didn't have enough mana for this additional distance, it still wouldn't connect with the spatial node in the Starlight Fortress. Fortunately, he succeeded in the end. At this time, Liang Jing called him and asked in a panic, Guild Leader, did something happen on your side? A pillar of light suddenly came from the teleportation hall. Right now, everyone in the city is talking about it, thinking that something big happened there. The teleportation hall was an important economic resource for Zero Wing City. At the same time, it was the foundation of the city's prosperity. In the absence of a guild residence and the teleportation array, players could only run to the distant Arctic Canyon. If this were to happen, Zero Wing's partner forces and their members would definitely be less enthusiastic about visiting Zero Wing City. Relax. Everything's fine, Xueqi said, chuckling. I just completed the teleportation array connecting the 2 continents. From now on, we can freely teleport to the western continent from the teleportation hall, and there won't be any restrictions on time or head count. We can freely teleport to the western continent? Liang Jing was momentarily stunned, her mind failing to process Xueqi's words. Her eyes were wide with disbelief as she looked at Xueqi's face on the screen. Before the World Passage's activation, connecting the 2 main continents held great importance only in terms of trade. However, after the World Passage opened, battlefields appeared all over the eastern continent, and massacres became common out in the wild. Due to the chaos and constant threats, many of the eastern continent's powers and players sought to develop on the western continent. Unfortunately, there was a limited number of ancient teleportation arrays on the eastern continent. Even among the superpowers, very few could travel between the 2 continents. Moreover, even these few superpowers could transport only a small number of elites at a time. Now, Xueqi was telling her that Zero Wing City's teleportation hall could facilitate travel to the western continent without any restrictions. How could she possibly believe this? If news of this matter were to get out, a tsunami of players would flood Zero Wing City within a day. This function would overturn the situation on the eastern continent. It was game-changing. Yes. Didn't you propose to open Zero Wing further? Smiling, Xueqi said, now that the intercontinental teleportation array is completed, you can announce to the public that Zero Wing City will be fully open to the public starting today. Our partner and subordinate forces will enjoy a 70% discount on all teleportations. Originally, he had not intended to fully open Zero Wing City so soon. However, the city's development was astonishing, hitting a bottleneck already. To further spread Zero Wing's influence, he could only fully open Zero Wing City to the public. In this way, Zero Wing could attract an ocean of wealth and resources to Zero Wing City, as well as more expert players to the guild. Fully open the city? Guild leader, isn't this a little too soon? Liang Jing panicked at Xueqi's words. Zero Wing City's present environment and security standards are already enough to drive many players and superpowers wild. Once news that our teleportation hall is connected to the Western continent spreads, we will definitely become a thorn in the eyes of all forces on the Eastern continent. Even the Outer World's forces will probably go nuts over Zero Wing City. Liang Jing didn't even need to think about what would await Zero Wing City if the city were fully open to the public. It would definitely spark massive changes in the entire Eastern continent. No, the entire God's domain. The intensity of the changes would not be the slightest bit inferior to the World Passage's activation. At that time, Zero Wing would become the focal point of the entire God's domain even if it tried to maintain a low profile. With access to such frightening resources and influence, Zero Wing would soon grow into an existence that could surpass even the 5 great super guilds combined. This definitely wasn't an outcome any superpower native or outer world would be willing to see. Hence, as long as news of Zero Wing City's full opening spread, Zero Wing would become the common enemy of all native and outer world superpowers. While Zero Wing had recently grown significantly, it definitely couldn't go up against so many superpowers simultaneously. Not to mention, the outer world superpowers were existences that had successfully destroyed more than a dozen kingdoms. Moreover, the number of Tier 4 NPCs a kingdom commanded far exceeded Zero Wing's number of Tier 4 experts. The royal capitals of NPC kingdoms had stronger defenses than Zero Wing City, yet these cities had still fallen in the end. Of course, a large part of why these kingdoms had fallen was the Outer World's NPC forces. However, nobody could say for certain that the Outer World's players couldn't guide or cooperate with the Outer World's NPC forces to target Zero Wing. Naturally, Xueqi understood Liang Jing's concerns. In an earnest tone he explained, I understand, but this is a problem we will have to face sooner or later. Thus, we should strike while the iron is hot and strengthen Zero Wing in one fell swoop. If we succeed, we'll have a much better chance at contending with the native and outer world superpowers. Previously, 16th Cloud had provided him with plenty of information regarding the outer world's various forces. Hence, he understood that the main reason the Eastern continent had yet to fall completely was that only a small portion of the outer world superpowers and NPC forces had crossed the world passage. However, as more time passed, more outer world NPC and player forces were bound to arrive on the Eastern continent. Eventually, Zero Wing would have to go up against these outer world forces. To put it simply, Zero Wing wasn't in a race against the various forces but against time. Under these circumstances, the guild would naturally be better off developing as quickly as possible. Rather than acquiring small amounts of resources and developing slowly in secret, Zero Wing would be better off going big and developing rapidly while the Outer World's forces were still settling down in the Eastern continent. Not to mention, Zero Wing currently had a lot of partner forces already. With these partners, it wouldn't necessarily be impossible for Zero Wing to go up against the native and outer world superpowers that had yet to develop themselves adequately. Liang Jing was momentarily at a loss for words. In her opinion, Xueqi's decision was simply absurd. However, she didn't have a better suggestion. Relax. I know what I'm doing, Xueqi consoled when he saw Liang Jing's hesitancy. Just get everything prepared on your side. Also, notify Melancholic and Yulan about this. I'm afraid you three will be very busy in the future. Liang Jing had no choice but to nod helplessly. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Xueqi had always acted more like a figurehead than an actual guild leader. Although he had laid a massive foundation for the guild, he would leave the guild's daily maintenance and operation to others. Naturally, Liang Jing felt incredibly frustrated by this situation, and she frequently wished she could curse him to his face. Deep down, however, she still felt happy and excited for some inexplicable reason. After disconnecting the call, Liang Jing promptly began making the necessary preparations, while Shifeng headed to Zero Wing City's City Lord's Mansion. City Lord's Mansion, second underground floor, statue room. At this time, apart from Shifeng, everybody else had been told to leave the room. Shifeng had also temporarily removed the entry rights for core members and ordered the 2 Tier 4 fine gold guards outside to prevent anyone from approaching the room. Now that my concentration is at Tier 5, and my understanding of and control over mana have reached their limits, it's about time I tried breaking through to Tier 5. Looking at the ancient beast sculpture in front of him, Shifeng began constructing an entirely new mana body. Chapter 2867, Promotion to Tier 5. Although Shifeng had never tried to create a personalized mana body, he was very confident of success. Now that he had grasped the basic use of mana's various elements and his mana body had reached a 120% completion rate. After spending close to an hour inside the statue room, Shifeng finished constructing a brand new mana body. Simultaneously, the sound of a system notification entered his ears. System. The strength of the constructed mana body is at 144% of your current mana body. It is not at the Tier 5 standard. Shifeng revealed a wry smile as he looked at the system notification. Sure enough, constructing a Tier 5 mana body isn't easy. In his opinion, the new mana body he constructed was perfect. He had thoroughly implemented the basic properties of the various elements of mana into his mana body. He had even built an elemental magic array for each element, making it much easier to manipulate the ambient mana. Hence, he never thought that the strength of the new mana body would be at only 144% of his current mana body. From what he heard in his previous life, the requirement for the constructed Tier 5 mana body would depend on the rank of the player's existing mana body. The higher the rank, the lower the requirement. Take the gold mana body for example. One would need to construct a mana body that was at least 300% stronger to meet the Tier 5 mana body standard. On the other hand, a bronze mana body's owner would need to reach 500% to get promoted to Tier 5. This was why expert players needed to secure the best mana body possible at Tier 3. This decision didn't just relate to the strength of one's mana. It also served as a massive hurdle to reaching Tier 5. If I didn't meet the requirement even with 144%, it seems I'll need to reach at least 200% to get promoted to Tier 5 with an epic mana body. After pondering for a moment, Shifeng took out the Sword Saint's legacy he had obtained in the ancient god's domain. He then began accepting the legacy guidance in silence. The mana body he constructed just now was already the limit of his current abilities. In his opinion, there were 3 possible reasons behind his failure to meet the requirements. The first was that his control over mana was insufficient. The second was that his understanding of mana was insufficient. The third was that his understanding of mana bodies was insufficient. Shifeng felt that his control over and understanding of mana had already reached the limits of Tier 4. It should be impossible to improve on them any further. Not to mention, the Dragon Phantom in the trial had praised his level, and even stated that some Tier 5 dragons might not be able to rival him in these 2 aspects. Hence, these 2 aspects were unlikely to be his stumbling block. In that case, the problem should lie with his poor understanding of mana bodies. Meanwhile, solving this problem was simple. Previously, he had refrained from accepting the Sword Saint's legacy guidance because he was afraid of wasting it. Back then, he felt that his foundation was still lacking and that he still needed to accumulate more strength. The stronger he became, the greater his harvest from the legacy guidance. However, his foundation had now grown so sturdy that even Tier 5 adult dragons might not be a match for him. It was the perfect moment for him to accept the Sword Saint's knowledge. Following this, time passed rapidly inside the statue room. A flood of information kept pouring into Shifeng's mind. The more information he browsed through, the brighter his eyes became. Thanks to this information, many of his questions had gotten answered. He also grew increasingly mesmerized by the Sword Saint's knowledge. After the legacy guidance was over, Shifeng stared at the ancient beast sculpture idly, his mind immersed in the knowledge he gained. While Shifeng quietly processed the Sword Saint's legacy guidance, a commotion raged in Zero Wing's guild cities. Just a moment ago, Zero Wing had announced that it would open Zero Wing City to the public. all players could teleport to Zero Wing City via Sky Spring City and enter it from the Arctic Canyon. Everyone who received this piece of news found it to be unbelievable. Awesome! This is great! I heard that you could raise your training efficiency by several times inside Zero Wing City. I never thought that Zero Wing would open such an amazing place to the public. That's not all of it. Did you see the levels of Zero Wing's members? Not that long ago, I was at roughly the same level as their Tier 3 members. Now, they're at least 3 levels above me. The grinding speed in the Arctic Canyon is simply ridiculous. Nowadays, no player on the Eastern continent was unaware of Zero Wing City's existence. However, as Zero Wing had reserved the city for its exclusive use, everyone not affiliated with the guild could only watch and envy from the sidelines. Even the various superpowers were helpless against Zero Wing City. Now that Zero Wing City is open to the public, how could they not feel excited? Less than half an hour after Zero Wing's announcement, practically every native player and player force on the Eastern continent had found out about it. Fire Wing Empire, Secret Pavilion's headquarters. As the most well-informed transcendental organization in God's domain, the Secret Pavilion was one of the first guilds to learn of Zero Wing City's public opening. It had even found out detailed information, such as Zero Wing City's entrance fee pricing and current player population. Uncle Yuan, it seems Zero Wing finally plans on giving its all. Purple Jade smiled as she read the detailed report in her hands. Looking at Yuan Tianxin, she said, "This development will probably make the Eastern continent superpowers pretty anxious." At this time, Purple Jade's aura had already undergone a massive transformation. Not only did she give off an otherworldly vibe, but she also exuded an indescribable feeling of sharpness. She was now a level 153, Tier 4 Sword Emperor. The mana she radiated even appeared somewhat misty. If Xueqi were to see her now, he would be surprised. Zero Wing's development has reached a bottleneck. If the War of Worlds did not take place, it might have been able to continue developing quietly for some time. While sorting through the reports spread across his desk, Yuan Tianxin was slightly surprised when reading the news on Zero Wing. However, now that the Outer World players have intruded into the Eastern continent, Zero Wing has to open Zero Wing City to acquire even more resources if it wants to make any further progress. However, it is also a risky move, given Zero Wing's current state. I initially thought Zero Wing would maintain a low profile for a while longer. Black Flames opening the city as soon as he returned was beyond my expectations. I can't help thinking that he is rushing things a little too much. Yuan Tianxin did not doubt that Xueqi had opened Zero Wing City to the public because of the Outer World players' invasion. However, while doing so would allow Zero Wing City to develop rapidly, it would also turn the city into an eyesore. The Outer World superpowers were not as easy to deal with as the Eastern continent's native superpowers. Not to mention, the Outer World superpowers definitely would not wish to see the remnant forces of the native superpowers they defeated flocking to Zero Wing's banner and creating a colossal native power. Previously, the Outer World superpowers had refrained from targeting Zero Wing because the latter had always operated like a turtle, limiting its members' activity to the vicinity of its strongholds. With Zero Wing's guild cities and mobile fortresses' immense defensive capabilities, devouring the guild was a very challenging proposition. The guild cities of other superpowers posed much easier targets. However, now that Zero Wing had fully opened Zero Wing City to the public, even a fool could foretell the consequences of this action. With the city's massive advantages, Zero Wing would become the strongest and largest guild on the Eastern continent. Moreover, it wouldn't take long for this future to come to fruition. Given this situation, although Zero Wing was a tough nut to crack, the Outer World superpowers would still choose to annihilate Zero Wing first for the sake of their future. However, unlike Yuan Tianxin, not only did Purple Jade not feel confused by this situation, but it had even ignited her fighting spirit. Uncle Yuan, since you're free right now, why don't we go take a look at Zero Wing City? I've been thinking of visiting guild leader Black Flame. I've improved a lot after returning from that place, but I haven't had a chance to test myself. I can use this chance to ask guild leader Black Flame for some guidance, and see which one of us has made greater improvements during this period. After she returned from her training, nobody among the Secret Pavilion's younger generation could match her. Since she had always set Xueqi as her target, she was very curious to see whether she could now defeat him and become God's domain's #1 swordsman. All right. Since you wish to go, I'll go with you. Yuan Tiexian revealed a bitter smile as he took in Purple Jade's spirited look. She had been restless ever since completing her training. However, he also felt that Xueqi would be a good opponent for the current Purple Jade. Afterward, Yuan Tiexian and Purple Jade departed the secret pavilion's headquarters and teleported to Sky Spring City. While the eastern continent was in an uproar over Zero Wing City's opening. Inside the City Lord's mansion of Zero Wing City, Xueqi's eyes opened abruptly. Amazing! As expected of a complete legacy guidance from an ancient sword saint. After processing the sword saint's legacy guidance, Xueqi finally understood what exactly a complete legacy guidance was. He also understood why Fire Dance would make such significant improvements after experiencing the legacy guidance. The legacy guidance described the properties and usage methods of the various elements of mana in detail, and provided a comprehensive introduction to the components and basic applications of the mana body. Although the information provided mainly targeted the swordsman class, it was also beneficial to the other classes. This was especially true for the information on the mana body's components. Of course, if one lacked a good understanding of the fundamental properties of mana's various elements, one would have difficulty understanding all of the information provided. Naturally, one's improvements would also be limited. This was because all of the mana body's basic applications mentioned in the legacy guidance required familiarity with the various elements of mana. My previous considerations for the mana body were too arbitrary. Moreover, they were all modifications based on my existing mana body when the Tier 5 mana body is essentially something completely different. When Xueqi thought about the mana body he previously created, he couldn't help laughing at his ignorance. Why were Tier 5 entities so much more powerful than Tier 4 entities? It was because Tier 5 existences possessed life ratings far superior to Tier 4 existences. The two couldn't even be considered the same type of creature. Yet, he had foolishly tried to use his Tier 4 mana body as a base for his Tier 5 mana body. His idea was fundamentally flawed. Another reason contributing to a Tier 5 existence's strength was their powerful mana. The mana flowing within their bodies was no longer gaseous or misty. Instead, it was liquid. Hence, when constructing a Tier 5 mana body, one had to liquefy their mana. If one couldn't achieve such mana, constructing a Tier 5 mana body would naturally be impossible. After thinking up to this point, Xueqi began his second attempt at constructing his Tier 5 mana body. Liquefying one's mana might be incredibly difficult for others, but it wasn't an impossible task for a Grandmaster Magician like Xueqi. All he needed to do was integrate a magic array that condensed mana within his mana body. Moreover, he had even identified the magic array for this job. The 12-array magic world. The 12-array magic world was an ancient magic array created by a saint. Although its simplicity meant even master magicians could learn it, Xueqi felt that this magic array was incredibly powerful, particularly its ability to improve the mana affinity of those within its range. At the very least, such a feat was still beyond him even now. Xueqi began trying to integrate the 12-array magic world with the mana body he constructed. 1 failure. 2 failures. 3 failures. Time passed rapidly as the number of failures piled up. After an unknown amount of time had gone by with success still nowhere in sight, Xueqi began to doubt his plan's feasibility. However, just when he considered giving up. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU System. Congratulations! You have successfully constructed a new mana body. The constructed mana body's strength is at 336% of your current mana body and has reached the Tier 5 standard. The created mana body is evaluated to be at the epic rank. Do you wish to replace your current mana body with it and get promoted to Tier 5? A Tier 5 epic mana body? Xueqi was momentarily dumbfounded. He had known that so long as he succeeded, his personalized mana body wouldn't be of low quality. It would reach the gold rank at the very least. However, he never expected that integrating the 12-array magic world into his mana body would yield such an astonishing result. He immediately chose to replace his mana body without hesitation. He had created this mana body out of sheer luck. If he tried recreating it, he wouldn't necessarily achieve a similar standard. Hence, he naturally had to accept it. Chapter 2868. Sword Saint. When Xueqi chose to replace his existing mana body, the mana within the room practically vanished. His new mana body had drawn even the mana stored within the deep void. Like a hungry beast, his new mana body devoured the mana around it, nourishing itself continuously. This phenomenon lasted for more than a minute before it finally stopped, and the room's mana gradually recovered. Tier 5. So, this is the power of Tier 5? When Xueqi sensed the frightening power his body exuded effortlessly and the indescribable feeling of omnipotence, he finally understood why even Tier 4 world creation experts couldn't defeat a bona fide Tier 5 existence. He also fully understood the strength and terror of Tier 5 existences. Compared to when he was a Tier 4, the mana flowing inside his mana body was many times denser. The volume of his mana had also increased by more than tenfold. Now, even the world around him was having trouble holding his mana. If even the world of God's domain itself could not withstand the mana of a Tier 5 existence, there was no need to mention the small world created by a Tier 4 world creation expert. Moreover, this wasn't the only factor that made Tier 5 existences powerful. System. Congratulations! You have become a Tier 5 Blade Saint, Sword Saint. All basic attributes plus 5,000, all resistances plus 500, mana recovery rate increased by 300%. All physical and magical attacks received that are below Tier 5 will be weakened by 40%. All basic attributes increased by 150%, physique increased by 200%, and reaction speed improved by 100%. Rewarding 200 legacy skill points. He had received a flat increase of only 2,000 points to all basic attributes when he got promoted to Tier 4, yet received a 5,000 point boost for reaching Tier 5. None of his weapons and equipment could provide such a significant amount of basic attributes, not to mention the massive boost to his physique. Right now, even if he replaced all his equipment with bronze equipment, he could still beat up a Tier 4 expert fully geared in epic equipment. In terms of basic attributes, he could match a Tier 4 expert with several pieces of fragmented legendary equipment. Only a legendary weapon could offset this difference. As for legendary equipment, the basic attributes provided would still be slightly insufficient to fill the gap. Of course, basic attributes didn't represent everything. If a Tier 4 expert's combat standard surpassed a Tier 5 expert's, the Tier 4 expert could still emerge victorious in a fight. With this power, I will have no problem fighting even Tier 5 NPCs. After seeing his basic attributes, Xueqi felt more confident about Zero Wing's future development. His strength and agility attributes both exceeded the 60,000 mark already. Typically, a Tier 4 berserker fully geared in epic items would have only around 15,000 strength at level 150. And even if the berserker possessed a top-tier fragmented legendary weapon, the berserker would only have about 22,000 or 23,000 strength. As for NPCs, according to the research of players in his previous life, a level 180, Tier 5 NPC would have around 70,000 or 80,000 points in their main basic attributes. While Xueqi was still inferior to Tier 5 NPCs in basic attributes, this difference wasn't impossible to overcome. Moreover, now that he had reached Tier 5, every level up he achieved would significantly boost his basic attributes. With his current equipment, he could easily breach the 80,000 mark once he reached level 180. Not to mention, his combat standards were much superior to the average Tier 5 NPCs. Overall, he was already more than capable of contending with level 180, Tier 5 NPCs. Of course, while he might have the ability to fight Tier 5 NPCs, he wasn't so arrogant as to provoke Tier 5 NPCs. After all, he currently could cope with the most common Tier 5 NPCs, but if a Tier 5 NPC possessed even a single piece of legendary equipment, he would have to avoid them like the plague. It seems I'll have to get Fire and the others to search for some god crystals. In an era where gods had secluded themselves from the world, Tier 5 existences were indeed the apex combatants of God's domain. However, there were still significant differences even among Tier 5s. The possession of legendary weapons and equipment played a vital role in this difference. Only after obtaining a legendary weapon or equipment could a Tier 5 expert enter the leading echelon of Tier 5 existences and walk around God's domain without fear. Such a Tier 5 expert would be an invincible existence short of Tier 6 gods. However, if a Tier 5 expert did not own a legendary weapon or equipment, they would only be second-rate among Tier 5 existences, regardless of any heaven-defying combat standards. While they might be able to contend against Tier 5 experts belonging to the leading echelon, they would never be part of it. Indeed, the difference between having a legendary item and not having one was precisely that massive. In the past, every Tier 5 expert capable of transcending tiers to fight Tier 6 God-ranked experts owned a legendary weapon or equipment, with some even having more than one. If Xueqi wanted to roam God's domain without fear, obtaining a legendary weapon or equipment was of utmost importance. After Xueqi familiarized himself with his Tier 5 mana body, he left the statue room. However, when he stepped into the City Lord's mansion's lobby, he was stupefied by the sight that greeted him. People crowded the room to capacity. Apart from the Zero Wing members maintaining order, the other players in the lobby were members of guilds and adventurer teams. These players were lined up in front of the service counters to rent either a shop or a private house in Zero Wing City. They had bloodshot eyes and frantic looks on their faces as they waited in line. BRIL/B/B if not for the 200 Tier 3 NPCs, 3 Tier 4 NPCs, and many Tier 3 members of Zero Wing maintaining order, a fight would have long since broken out in the lobby. Didn't I tell Liang Jing to raise the rentals for the shops? Did she make a mistake? Xueqi found this scene very puzzling. Anyone who wasn't a fool could tell how popular Zero Wing City currently was. However, Zero Wing City had limited land. Even if it was now a main city, it still didn't have enough land to satisfy the Eastern continent's entire player population. Hence, to maximize Zero Wing's profits, raising rentals was a must. Xueqi approached one of the service counters to inspect Zero Wing City's shop's rental prices. However, what he saw made him gasp. How ruthless is she? Even a small shop located in Zero Wing City's outer area had a rental of 3,000 magic crystals and 600 gold per week, more than double the price Xueqi intended. The amount of magic crystals Liang Jing charged was particularly maddening. Ever since the Outer World players invaded the Eastern continent, magic crystal production had plummeted, and the various native powers had suffered immensely. In Xueqi's opinion, renting a small shop in the city's outskirts for 1,000 magic crystals would already be pushing the envelope. Liang Jing's price of 3,000 magic crystals was no different from daylight robbery. As for the shops located on Zero Wing City's main street, the minimum price was 20,000 magic crystals. One couldn't even use coins to offset part of the rent. Moreover, one had to bid for these shops in an auction. Despite these cutthroat prices, players still filled the City Lord's mansion's lobby. Xueqi found this situation utterly unbelievable. For a moment, he even wondered if magic crystals had suddenly depreciated during his seclusion. Just when Xueqi thought of contacting Liang Jing to ask her about Zero Wing City's situation, he suddenly received a call. The caller was none other than Liang Jing. Read latest chapters at Xueqi World. EU Guild Leader, can I interrupt you for a moment? Liang Jing asked anxiously. Did something happen to Zero Wing City? Xueqi asked strangely. No, it's just that the secret pavilion's people came to visit. Aside from them, 3 of the 5 great super guilds have sent representatives to us. There are a lot of them, and some of them don't seem to be here with kind intentions, Liang Jing said nervously. They are waiting in the residence's reception room right now, and they say they must meet with you, no matter what. The secret pavilion was a transcendental power, while the 5 great super guilds were godlike existences in the virtual gaming world. If news that 3 of the 5 great super guilds had arrived were to spread, it would cause a sensation. All right, I got it. I'll head over now. Have them wait for a moment. Xueqi chuckled when he heard Liang Jing's words, not at all surprised by this situation. After all, the current Zero Wing City was no ordinary city. What would be strange would be these titans of the gaming world not showing any reaction. He immediately left the City Lord's mansion and made his way to Zero Wing's residence. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.